The first light of dawn painted the mountains with gentle strokes of amber and gold, their massive silhouettes standing guard over the sleeping town of Granite Falls. The surface of Lake Morrison rippled in the morning breeze, distorting the perfect reflection of Colorado's rugged landscape. Here, in this quiet corner of the world, Alexis Morgan found the closest thing to peace she'd known in years. She sat on the weathered dock legs dangling over the edge, a thin wisp of steam rising from the coffee mug clutched between her scarred hands. The morning chill seeped through her worn leather jacket, but she welcomed the discomfort. Physical sensations, cold, heat, pain. These were anchors that kept her tethered to the present when her mind threatened to drag her back. Alexis reached into her pocket and withdrew a small metal object that caught the early light. A military dog tag worn smooth around the edges from years of being carried. Not hers. The name stamped into the metal read, Cole Nathan J. CPT. She ran her thumb over the letters, a ritual performed so many times that the action had become automatic meditative. "Was it worth it, Nate?" she whispered to the still morning air. "Was my life worth yours?" The only answer came from the gentle lapping of water against the wooden pylons below. 5 years since the Korengal Valley. 5 years since she'd watched her team, her family die while she survived. 5 years of running, hiding, of becoming someone else. Alexis Morgan, quiet bartender with the mysterious past. The woman who never spoke about herself, who kept her head down, who flinched at sudden movements and always sat with her back to the wall. She picked up a smooth stone from beside her and sent it skipping across the lake's surface. 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps before it disappeared beneath the dark water. "Some days I think I should have gone down with you," she said to the dog tag. "Other days, I'm just tired, Nate. Tired of carrying this. Tired of being a ghost." The sudden buzz of her phone cut through the silence, shattering the moment. Alexis sighed, tucking the dog tag back into her pocket before checking the message. "Need you to come in early. Problem with delivery. Edwin." She stood brushing dust from her jeans. The peaceful interlude was over. Time to return to the world of the living. As she walked back toward her truck, Alexis glanced over her shoulder at the mountains, their peaks now fully illuminated by the rising sun. They would still be here tomorrow. Some things, at least, remained constant. Whiskey River sat at the edge of Granite Falls, a weathered wooden structure that had begun life as a trading post during the gold rush before evolving into a saloon, then a general store, and finally, a bar. Its current owner, Edwin Reed, had preserved much of the original architecture: the exposed beams, the long oak bar, the stone fireplace that dominated the far wall. The place smelled of wood polish, whiskey, and history. Alexis found Edwin in the storage room, frowning at a clipboard. At 65, he moved more slowly than he once had, but his mind remained sharp, his blue eyes alert beneath bushy white eyebrows. He looked up as she entered relief, crossing his lined face. "There you are. Sorry to call you in early." "No problem." Alexis nodded toward the clipboard. "Delivery issues. Liquor distributor sent half our order. Says there's a shortage of that Kentucky bourbon everyone's been asking for." Edwin sighed, running a hand through his thinning white hair. "But that's not the real problem. Had a visit this morning from those motorcycle fellows." Alexis stiffened her posture, shifting subtly from relaxed to alert. "The Iron Wolves." Edwin nodded, his expression grim. 3 of them. Said they were offering community protection services for local businesses. Wanted $2,000 a month. Protection from what? From them, I expect. Edwin set down the clipboard. I told them to take a hike. May not have been wise, but I'm too old to start paying tribute to thugs. Alexis studied the older man's face, noting the worry lines around his eyes, despite his defiant words. Edwin had given her a job 4 years ago, no questions asked. He'd respected her privacy, never pushed. When she deflected personal questions, created a space where she could exist without expectations. The thought of anyone threatening him made something cold and dangerous stir within her. "What did they say when you refused?" she asked, keeping her voice casual. "That I should reconsider, that Granite Falls was changing." Edwin shrugged. "Said they'd be back to continue our conversation." Lexis nodded, her mind already calculating scenarios, escape routes, defensive positions. Old habits that had kept her alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan before her selection for Unit Chimera. "Don't worry about it," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll handle the delivery calls. You should take it easy today." Edwin gave her a knowing look. "I didn't tell you so you could worry Alexis. I've dealt with bullies before." "I know." She helped him up from his chair. "But humor me anyway." As Edwin shuffled out to the main bar, Alexis remained in the storage room, taking a moment to center herself. The Iron Wolves had appeared in Granite Falls 3 months ago, establishing a clubhouse in an abandoned mechanic's garage on the outskirts of town. Initially, they'd kept to themselves, but rumors had begun circulating about businesses on the other side of town being approached for protection money. Now they'd reached Whiskey River. Alexis rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar tension building at the base of her neck. Just when she'd thought she'd found a quiet corner of the world, trouble had followed. But this time, it wasn't her past catching up with her. This was different, simpler in some ways, more complicated in others. This time, she had something to protect. The afternoon brought steady business to Whiskey River. Local regulars mixed with tourists passing through on their way to the national park, creating a comfortable buzz of conversation beneath the country music, playing from the old jukebox. Alexis moved efficiently behind the bar, mixing drinks, pulling beers, exchanging the occasional pleasantry, without revealing anything of substance about herself, a skill she'd perfected over the years. From her position, she could observe the entire room. The main entrance, the hallway leading to the restrooms, the emergency exit by the pool tables. 4 years of peace hadn't dulled her situational awareness. She noted each newcomer, assessed them for potential threats, then filed them away as harmless once they settled into normal patron behavior. Until the door swung open at 6:17 p.m. and 3 men in leather cuts emblazoned with the Iron Wolves insignia stepped inside. The ambient noise in the bar dropped immediately, conversations faltering as heads turned toward the newcomers. Alexis continued drying a glass, her movements unhurried, but her senses sharpened to knife-edge acuity. She recognized the lead man from Edwin's description, Carter, one of the higher-ranking members of the pack. Tall, heavily muscled, with a shaved head and a beard that reached the middle of his chest. The 2 men flanking him were younger, eager with the twitchy energy of those with something to prove. They took their time crossing to the bar, Carter's eyes sweeping the room with deliberate arrogance before settling on Alexis. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice neutral, revealing nothing of the calculations running through her mind, distance to the baseball bat beneath the counter angles of attack potential civilian casualties if things escalated. 3 beers, Carter said, slapping a 20 on the bar, and a conversation with the old man. Alexis set 3 glasses beneath the tap. "Edwin's not here." A lie, but one that might buy time. Edwin was in his office doing paperwork. "That right." Carter leaned forward, his massive forearms resting on the polished oak. "Funny, 'cause his truck's still in the parking lot." She slid the first beer across to him, her expression unchanged. "He's not available." Carter's hand shot out, closing around her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was tight, threatening. The movement was designed to establish dominance, to provoke fear. Instead, It activated something in Alexis that she'd kept carefully dormant for years. In an instant, her mind mapped multiple responses: the pressure point at the base of his thumb that would release his grip, the exposed trachea that could be crushed with a precise strike, the edge of the bar that could shatter his elbow if she applied the right leverage. "I suggest you let go," she said, her voice dropping to a register that should have warned him something was very wrong with his chosen target. He didn't notice. They never did. "Or what, sweetheart?" Carter smiled, looking back at his companions. The rest of the bar had gone silent, patrons sensing the dangerous shift in atmosphere. Alexis moved with snake-like speed, her free hand grabbing an empty shot glass from the bar and bringing it down hard enough on the edge of the counter to shatter it cleanly. In the same fluid motion, she held the jagged edge less than an inch from the major artery in Carter's wrist, her eyes cold and steady. "Or we find out if you bleed as fast as you talk." For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Carter's face registered shock, then uncertainty, then a calculating reassessment. The 2 men behind him tensed, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. From her peripheral vision, Alexis noted movement. A man sitting alone in the corner booth had shifted position, his hand disappearing beneath his jacket. Another threat. Numb. His posture was different, professional. Military, perhaps. Carter slowly released her wrist and stepped back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Just having some fun." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "No need to get all worked up." Alexis set the broken glass aside carefully. "Your beers," she said, placing the remaining 2 on the counter. "That'll be $15. Carter threw the 20 down, leaving the change. "Keep it. Service industry must be tough these days." He glanced around the bar. "Shame if something happened to this place. Lot of old wood. Probably a fire hazard." The threat hung in the air as the 3 men retreated to a corner table, huddling in conversation, occasionally glancing toward Alexis with newfound wariness. The other patrons gradually returned to their drinks, the tension in the room slowly dissipating, but not disappearing. Alexis felt the familiar post-adrenaline crash, beginning the slight tremor in her hands that she disguised by wiping down the already clean bar. She'd slipped, shown too much. The carefully constructed identity of Alexis Morgan, ordinary bartender, didn't include the ability to threaten armed men with broken glassware. Quite a show. The voice came from her left. The man from the corner booth now sat at the bar, nursing what appeared to be a whiskey on the rocks. Close up, she could better assess him. Mid-40s athletic build, maintained despite the beginnings of gray at his temples, careful eyes that missed nothing. His casual posture couldn't quite disguise the military bearing. "Just doing my job," Alexis replied, already building her defenses. "We don't tolerate harassment here." Is that what they teach in bartending school these days? A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. Threat neutralization. She met his gaze directly. "What can I get you? Another drink?" He studied her for a long moment, then pushed his glass forward. "Bourbon. Neat." As she poured his drink, she felt his eyes on her, not the way most men looked at her with desire or curiosity, but with recognition, as if he was confirming something he already knew. "Krav Maga," he said as she set the drink before him. "With some modifications. That wrist control was textbook, but the glass break was improvised. Nice touch." Alexis felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." He took a sip of his bourbon. "Unit 9 Specialty Training Right Chimera Program. They always did favor those hybrid techniques, military foundation with street adaptations." The glass Alexis was cleaning froze in mid-motion. Her eyes darted to the exits, calculating escape routes. Her go-bag was in her truck. She could be on the road in 3 minutes across the state line in 2 hours. The man held up a placating hand. "I'm not here to expose you, or to cause trouble." "Who are you?" Her voice had dropped to that dangerous register again. "Dylan Westbrook." He set his glass down carefully. "Nathan Cole was my brother." The glass slipped from Alexis's fingers, shattering on the floor behind the bar. The sound seemed to come from far away, drowned out by the sudden roaring in her ears. Nathan's face flashed in her mind, not as she'd last seen him bloodied and determined as he ordered her to run, but as he'd been before, confident, laughing the captain who led from the front and never asked his team to take risks he wouldn't take himself. "That's not possible," she managed. "Nate never mentioned a brother." "He wouldn't have. We weren't speaking when he deployed for that last tour." Dylan's eyes held hers, searching. "But I've been looking for you for a long time, Sergeant Morgan." The use of her former rank sent a shock through her system. No one had called her that in 5 years. On paper, Alexis Morgan had never served in the military. Her records had been classified, then buried, then erased, as part of the cover-up after Korengal. "You should leave," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will, but we need to talk." Dylan slid a business card across the bar. "I know what happened to Nathan's team, and I know you're the only survivor." Before she could respond, the sound of breaking glass came from the corner where the Iron Wolves sat. Carter had smashed a beer bottle against the table, his face flushed with anger as he rose to his feet. His companions followed suit, their postures aggressive. "This isn't over," Carter called across the bar, pointing at Alexis. "Not by a long shot." They stormed out the door, banging shut behind them. In their wake, the remaining patrons began gathering their belongings, sensing that Whiskey River was no longer a safe place to enjoy a quiet drink. Dylan hadn't moved. "Those men will be back, with reinforcements." "I can handle them." Alexis began gathering the discarded glasses from the now empty tables. "Maybe, but there's more going on here than a simple protection racket." Dylan stood, leaving a generous tip beside his unfinished bourbon. "When you're ready to talk, call me. I'll be around." After he left, Alexis retrieved his card from where she'd slipped it, beneath the bar mat. It was simple, understated Dylan Westbrook's security consultant, followed by a phone number. She stared at it for a long moment before tucking it into her pocket, alongside Nathan's dog tag. Nathan's brother, here in Granite Falls. It couldn't be coincidence. Her past, it seemed, had finally caught up with her. The night air was crisp as Alexis locked up Whiskey River just after midnight. Edwin had left early, complaining of his arthritis acting up in the cool autumn weather. She'd assured him she could handle closing alone, even as her senses remained on high alert for the return of the Iron Wolves. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and started down the poorly lit street toward her small apartment 3 blocks away. The town was quiet. Most businesses closed, the main street deserted, save for a few parked cars. Perfect conditions for an ambush. Alexis felt them before she heard them, a prickling awareness at the back of her neck, the subtle shift in the ambient sounds of the night. The soft purr of motorcycles idling around the corner ahead. The muffled sound of men's voices trying to be quiet, but betraying their positions to her trained ear. She didn't alter her pace, but her mind was already mapping escape routes, cataloging potential weapons, assessing threats. The alley to her right offered a path to the back of the bakery, where she knew the owner sometimes left a ladder out. The fire escape on the building to her left could provide high ground advantage. The construction site 2 blocks over would offer multiple hiding spots, but running would only trigger their predatory instincts. Confrontation was inevitable. "Hey, bar bitch!" Carter's voice echoed from the shadows ahead. Alexis stopped, weighing her options. He emerged from between 2 parked cars, followed by the same 2 men from earlier, and 2 more she hadn't seen before. They spread out as they approached, attempting to flank her. "That wasn't very hospitable service earlier," Carter said, pulling on leather gloves with deliberate menace. "Thought we'd have a word about customer relations." "It's been a long night," Alexis replied evenly. "Why don't we all go home and forget about it?" The men laughed, continuing their approach. "Oh, we're not going anywhere until you learn some respect," said one of the newcomers, a lanky man with a scraggly goatee. "Girls like you need to be taught lessons." In the dim streetlight, Alexis could see the outline of a knife in Carter's hand, the dull gleam of brass knuckles on another man's fist. 5 against 1 armed opponents open terrain with limited cover. The tactician in her calculated the odds as poor, but she had survived worse. "Last chance to walk away," she warned, her voice dropping to that register that should have alerted them that something was very wrong with their chosen target. They didn't notice. They never did. The first man lunged forward, reaching for her arm. Alexis pivoted, using his momentum against him, and drove her elbow into his solar plexus with controlled force. As he doubled over, gasping for breath, she seized his wrist and twisted, using the leverage to slam him face first into the hood of a parked car. The second attacker hesitated just long enough for Alexis to spin and deliver a precise kick to his knee. The joint buckled with a sickening pop, and he went down screaming. Carter, momentarily stunned by the sudden violence, recovered and slashed with his knife. Alexis evaded the first 2 swipes with minimal movement, conserving energy reading his pattern. On the third swipe, she stepped inside his guard, trapped his wrist against her body, and struck his elbow with the heel of her palm. Not hard enough to break it, but enough to send waves of pain up his arm. The knife clattered to the ground. She followed with 2 rapid strikes to his throat and solar plexus, carefully calculated to incapacitate without causing permanent damage. He collapsed, choking and gasping. The fourth man managed to land a glancing blow to her ribs before she took him down with a sweep to the legs and a precise strike to the base of his skull. The fifth fled engine of his motorcycle roaring to life as he sped away. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Alexis surveyed the 4 men groaning on the pavement, made sure none were critically injured, then calmly retrieved Carter's knife and tossed it down a storm drain. "Tell your friends what happened," she said quietly to Carter, who was struggling to rise to his hands and knees. "Tell them this was me being restrained." Without waiting for a response, she turned and continued her walk home, hands steady but heart pounding with a familiar post-combat rush she had hoped to never feel again. This was just the beginning. She knew the Iron Wolves wouldn't let such a humiliation pass unanswered. She had broken her cover, revealed a glimpse of her capabilities. After 4 years of peace of running from her past, it had found her anyway. Inside her sparse apartment, Alexis locked the door and methodically checked the windows before sinking onto her bed. She removed Nathan's dog tag from her pocket, staring at the worn metal as if it might offer guidance. "I'm sorry, Nate," she whispered. "I tried to leave it all behind." Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight. It never did after violence, after the memories were stirred. Instead, she closed her eyes and began the breathing exercises that sometimes held the nightmares at bay, knowing it was a temporary measure against what was coming. The desert air shimmered with heat as their Humvee crawled along the mountain road. Sergeant Alexis Morgan scanned the ridgelines through her sunglasses, the familiar knot of tension in her stomach tightening with each bend in the road. "I don't like this, Captain," she said, addressing the man in the passenger seat. "Too exposed." And Nathan Cole nodded, his own eyes constantly moving, searching the rocky terrain for signs of ambush. "I don't like it either, but intel says the HVT will be moving through this valley within the hour. We need eyes on." Alexis shifted in her seat, the weight of her body armor uncomfortable in the oppressive heat. Something felt wrong about this mission. The intelligence had been too precise, the timing too convenient, the route too obvious. Sir requesting permission to deploy Richardson and Martinez as an advance team. I want eyes on that ridge before we commit the full squad. Nathan considered this, then nodded. Do it. We'll hold position here until they report back. She was reaching for the radio when she saw it a flash of sunlight reflecting off metal where there should have been only rock and scrub. Contact left ridge. The explosion cut off her words, lifting the front of the vehicle as though it had struck an invisible wall. Time slowed as the Humvee tipped, then rolled. The world became a chaotic blur of metal and dust and screams. Alexis came to upside down, suspended by her seatbelt, ears ringing and mouth filled with the copper taste of blood. Through the shattered window, she could see two of her teammates lying motionless on the road. Automatic fire rattled against the Humvee's frame. "Captain Torres Jackson," she called out, struggling with her belt release. Only groans answered her. She fell awkwardly when the belt gave way, pain lancing through her right shoulder as she landed. Captain Nathan Cole was half-conscious in the front, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Ambush," he mumbled. Get the radio. Back up." Alexis crawled forward, ignoring the broken glass cutting into her palms. The radio was damaged but functional. She called for backup, giving their coordinates before a fresh barrage of gunfire forced her to duck. "We need to move, sir," she told Nathan, helping him out of his restraints. "Torres and Jackson are down outside. Martinez is still in back. Looks bad." The sound of approaching vehicles reached them through the gunfire. "Thank God," Nathan gasped. "Backup's already here." But Alexis's relief turned to horror as she peered through the cracked windshield. "Those aren't ours," she hissed. "Taliban technicals, at least 3. Nathan's face hardened. "Get Martinez and fall back to those rocks," he ordered, checking his sidearm. "Sir, with respect." "That's an order, Sergeant. We're not all getting out of this kill box. Make it count." Alexis hesitated, torn between duty and loyalty, before scrambling to the back, where Private Martinez lay bleeding from shrapnel wounds to his leg and side. "Come on, Miguel," she grunted, hauling him up. "We're moving." She half-dragged, half-carried Martinez out the rear door, as Nathan laid down covering fire from the front. The rocky outcropping he'd indicated was 30 meters away, 30 meters of exposed ground under enemy fire. "Go!" Nathan shouted. "I'm right behind you." Alexis knew he was lying. The look they exchanged said everything words couldn't: gratitude, respect. Farewell. Then she was running, zigzagging across the open ground with Martinez's arms slung across her shoulders. Each step an eternity under the whistling bullets. They reached the rocks as a massive explosion rocked the Humvee. Nathan had detonated a grenade, taking out the nearest attackers, but sacrificing himself in the process. Alexis pressed Martinez into a crevice, applied a tourniquet to his mangled leg, and readied her rifle. For the next 40 minutes, she held off the remaining attackers, changing positions, conserving ammunition, keeping them at bay, until the distant thrum of helicopter rotors signaled salvation. By then, Martinez had lost consciousness from blood loss, and Alexis had taken a bullet through her thigh. As the medevac chopper descended in a swirl of dust and wind, Alexis looked back at the burning Humvee, where 3 of her team had died: Nathan, Torres, Jackson. Their faces burned into her memory, alongside the certainty that she should have done more, should have seen the ambush coming, should have saved them. The smoke from the wreckage seemed to form accusing fingers against the sky, pointing at the sole surviving officer, pointing at her failure. Alexis jolted awake, sheets soaked with sweat, the echo of helicopter rotors still ringing in her ears. Her hand instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there before reality reasserted itself. She was in Granite Falls, in her apartment. Safe. Except she wasn't safe anymore. Last night's confrontation with the Iron Wolves would have consequences. She showered quickly, the hot water failing to wash away the residual unease from the nightmare. In the bathroom mirror, Alexis assessed herself dispassionately, the faint bruising on her forearm where one of the bikers had grabbed her, the small cut on her knuckle. Nothing serious, nothing compared to the scars hidden beneath her clothes, the roadmap of her military career etched into her skin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Edwin. Coming in early today, need to talk. Alexis dressed in her usual jeans and simple button-down shirt, tucking a small folding knife into her boot and adding a canister of pepper spray to her pocket. Small precautions that hadn't been necessary yesterday, but felt essential today. Whiskey River was still closed when she arrived, but Edwin's beat-up pickup was parked outside. She found him sitting at the bar, coffee mug in hand, worry etched into the lines of his face. "Had some visitors this morning," he said without preamble. "Two guys from the Iron Wolves looking for you." Alexis's expression remained neutral as she poured herself coffee. "What did they want?" "Wanted to know where you live, who you are. Said one of their boys got jumped last night by a woman matching your description." Edwin studied her face. "I told them they had the wrong person, that you're just a bartender." "Thank you." "They didn't believe me." Edwin's gnarled hands tightened around his mug. "Said they'd be back." Alexis sipped her coffee, considering her options. What happened last night? She considered lying, manufacturing some story about a misunderstanding or mistaken identity, but Edwin deserved better. He'd given her a job and a place in this town when she had nothing, asked few questions, and trusted her completely. "Three of them cornered me after work," she said simply. "They were looking for trouble." "Jesus, Alexis, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" A small, humorless smile touched her lips. "I'm fine." "They're not." Edwin stared at her realization slowly dawning. "You took on 3 Iron Wolves. How—" "It doesn't matter how," she interrupted gently. "What matters is they'll be back and they'll bring friends. I've complicated things for you, Edwin. I'm sorry." The old man shook his head. "Don't apologize for defending yourself. But these Iron Wolves, they're something else. They showed up about 6 months ago and have been squeezing businesses all over town. Sheriff Garrett won't stand up to them. Says his deputies are outgunned and outmanned." "The protection racket is just the beginning," Alexis said. "Gangs like this start small, then expand into drugs, weapons, human trafficking. They're testing boundaries, seeing how much the town will tolerate." Edwin raised an eyebrow. "You seem to know a lot about it." Alexis took a deliberate sip of coffee, avoiding his gaze. "I read the papers." Before Edwin could press further, the back door banged open, and a young woman burst in. Her curly brown hair escaped from a hasty ponytail, her medical school sweatshirt rumpled from travel. "Dad!" she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Edwin. "Why didn't you tell me you were having trouble with those bikers? I had to hear it from Mrs. Finley at the gas station." Edwin patted his daughter's back awkwardly. "It's nothing to worry about, Emily. Just some rough characters throwing their weight around." Emily pulled back, hands on hips. "Nothing to worry about. The whole town's talking about how they've threatened you." She glanced at Alexis, adding, "Hi, Alexis. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt." "It's good to see you, Emily. How's medical school?" "Brutal, but I love it." Emily's expression turned serious again. "Dad, why don't you report these guys? Isn't that what we pay Sheriff Garrett for?" Edwin and Alexis exchanged glances. "Garrett's hands are tied without evidence of actual crimes," Edwin explained. "And nobody wants to testify against the Iron Wolves." "That's ridiculous! They can't just... The conversation halted as the front door of the bar swung open violently. 5 men in iron wolves' cuts strode in, led by a tall figure whose presence immediately commanded attention. Unlike the others, he wore his leather without patches or insignia. His only identifier was a silver wolf's head ring on his right hand. His face was all hard angles beneath close-cropped salt and pepper hair, his eyes the flat, assessing gaze of a predator. "Edwin Reed," he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. Edwin stepped forward, positioning himself between the newcomers and his daughter. "Bars closed until 11. I'm not here for a drink." The man smiled without warmth. "Vincent Harding. I own the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. Seems we have some business to discuss." Alexis remained perfectly still, cataloging each man's positioning, noting bulges beneath jackets that likely indicated weapons. She kept her hands visible on the bar, projecting an appearance of nervous concern rather than combat readiness. Edwin's shoulders straightened. "I don't have any business with you." "That's where you're wrong." Harding's gaze swept the bar, lingering briefly on Alexis before returning to Edwin. "This town needs protection. Protection costs money. It's a simple transaction. We have a sheriff for protection." Harding laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Garrett man couldn't protect a birthday cake from a toddler." His expression hardened. "3 of my boys were assaulted last night near your establishment. That makes this conversation a bit more urgent." Edwin glanced at Alexis, a silent warning to stay out of it. "I don't know anything about that." "Really?" Harding gestured, and Carter stepped forward, his face now sporting an impressive bruise where it had met the car hood. "Carter here says it was your bartender." All eyes turned to Alexis. "There's been a mistake," she said, infusing her voice with just the right amount of nervous confusion. "I went straight home after work." Carter pointed an accusing finger. "That's her! That's the bitch who jumped us." Harding studied Alexis with renewed interest, his gaze more calculating than before. "You saying my man is lying, sweetheart? I'm saying there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Harding repeated, taking a step toward her. "You know what I understand. I understand that businesses in this town pay for protection. I understand that my men were attacked while collecting what's owed, and I understand that someone needs to be held accountable." He moved with surprising speed for his size, grabbing a beer bottle from the bar and smashing it against the edge, leaving a jagged weapon in his hand. Before anyone could react, he lunged toward Edwin. Alexis's body responded before conscious thought, muscle memory and training taking over. She vaulted over the bar, intercepted Harding's arm mid-swing, and redirected the makeshift weapon away from Edwin. In the same fluid motion, she delivered a precise strike to Harding's wrist, causing his hand to spasm and drop the bottle. Harding stared at her in shock for a millisecond before swinging his other fist in a powerful haymaker. Alexis slipped inside his guard, blocked the punch with her forearm, and drove her elbow into his sternum. The other Iron Wolves started forward, but Harding raised a hand, stopping them. His eyes never left Alexis's face. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Alexis maintained her defensive stance. "Just a bartender who doesn't like seeing friends threatened." Harding shook his head slowly. "No, you're not. That move that wasn't bar fight. That was professional." A slow smile spread across his face. "Military police." When Alexis didn't answer, Harding nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Interesting. Very interesting." To everyone's surprise, he backed away, straightening his jacket. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Edwin, when fewer eyes are watching." He glanced at Alexis. "You've bought yourself a day. Use it wisely." After the Iron Wolves left, silence filled the bar for several heartbeats. "What the hell?" Emily stared at Alexis, eyes wide. "Where did you learn to move like that?" "Self-defense classes," Alexis replied automatically, the lie practiced from years of use. Edwin wasn't buying it. "Alexis," he said quietly, "what aren't you telling us?" Alexis met his gaze, seeing the concern, the confusion, and beneath it all, a flicker of fear, not of her, but for her. She had spent 4 years carefully constructing her identity in Granite Falls, the quiet, competent bartender who kept to herself. In less than 24 hours, that carefully maintained facade was crumbling. "It's complicated," she finally said, "and not something I like to talk about." "Well, you better start," Edwin insisted, "because those men will be back, and they won't be caught off guard next time." Alexis knew he was right. The moment she had intervened, she had escalated the situation beyond simple intimidation. Harding's curiosity about her background was dangerous. Men like him would see someone with her skills as either a threat to be eliminated or an asset to be exploited. "I was in the army," she admitted the partial truth easier than the full one. "Served overseas, picked up some skills." "Some skills?" Emily echoed incredulously. "Alexis, you moved like something out of an action movie." A knock at the back door interrupted the conversation. Edwin went to answer it, returning with Sheriff David Garrett, a heavy-set man in his 50s, whose uniform always seemed slightly too small for his frame. "Edwin, Alexis," he greeted them, nodding at Emily. "Got reports of the Iron Wolves showing up here. Everything okay?" "Just a disagreement about payment terms," Edwin replied, not mentioning Alexis's confrontation. Garrett sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through thinning hair. "Look, Edwin, I know you're proud, but these guys are serious business. We've had 3 hospitalizations in the county from people who tried to stand up to them." "So, you're saying we should just pay?" Emily demanded. "That's your official law enforcement advice." The sheriff's face reddened. "I'm saying pick your battles, Emily. I've got 4 deputies covering the entire county. The Iron Wolves have 20 full members, all armed, plus God knows how many associates. Until they commit a major crime, I can get state resources, for my hands are tied." Alexis watched Garrett carefully, noting the way his eyes didn't quite meet theirs, the slight tremor in his hands, the sweat at his temples despite the cool morning. Fear, certainly, but there was something else. Something that prickled her instincts. "Has anyone actually filed a police report against them?" she asked. Garrett's gaze flicked to her, then away. "A few walked it back. Nothing that sticks. Witnesses get amnesia real quick when the Iron Wolves show up at their doorstep." He replaced his hat. "Just be careful, Edwin. These guys don't mess around. If they come back, call me right away." After he left, Edwin locked the door behind him and turned to Alexis, his expression troubled. "He's scared," he said. "Never seen David like that before." "It's more than fear," Alexis replied. "But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that Harding will be back, and next time, he'll bring enough men to make sure he gets what he wants." "So what do we do?" Emily asked. "You and your father need to leave town for a few days," Alexis said. "Stay with friends, family, somewhere the Iron Wolves won't think to look." "And what about you?" Edwin asked. Alexis turned to them, her expression resolute. "I need to find out more about them, their operation, their base, their weaknesses." "And how exactly are you going to do that?" Edwin's voice was skeptical. Alexis met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm going to use some old skills I hoped I'd never need again." That night, Alexis rode a borrowed motorcycle along the outskirts of Granite Falls, dressed in dark clothing, a baseball cap pulled low over her face. Intelligence gathering was the first step in any operation, and despite 4 years of civilian life, the tactical mindset returned to her with disturbing ease. Through careful questioning of bar patrons and a few discreet calls to contacts from her former life, she had identified a likely location for the Iron Wolves' local operations, an abandoned sawmill 5 miles outside town. Now she needed visual confirmation and an assessment of their strength. The sawmill appeared dark as she approached, but Alexis noted the vehicles parked behind it, at least 15 motorcycles and 5 pickup trucks, suggesting a significant presence. She ditched her bike in a stand of trees half a mile away and continued on foot, using the scrubby terrain for cover. Years of combat experience guided her movements as she silently approached the building, identifying blind spots in the perimeter, noting the 2 sentries stationed at the main entrance sloppily positioned, smoking and chatting, rather than maintaining proper watchfulness. Alexis circled to the back of the sawmill, finding a loading dock door slightly ajar. From her position, she could hear voices from inside, one of which she recognized as Harding's. "Don't care how you do it. Reed will sell one way or another." Harding's voice was clear and cool. "The old man's stubborn," another voice replied, "and after today, he knows we're coming." "Then hurt him bad enough to send a message, not bad enough to kill him." A pause. "And find out about that bartender. Something's off about her." "Already working on it. Got a contact at the VA looking into service records matching her description." Alexis's blood ran cold. Her military records were supposed to be sealed due to the classified nature of her operations, but determined searching could potentially uncover her basic service history. "What about the product?" Harding asked, changing subjects. "Arriving tomorrow night. Blackwood confirmed the drop point, said to tell you he expects additional security after what happened in Bristol. He'll get it. Double the usual team." Blackwood. The name hit Alexis like a physical blow. It couldn't be. Not here, not now. She carefully shifted position, trying to get a visual through a dirty window. Inside, she could make out Harding and 5 others around a table covered with maps and what appeared to be bundles of cash. On a separate table, she glimpsed several automatic weapons. The scale of the operation was larger than she had anticipated. This wasn't just a local gang running protection rackets. The weapons, the mention of product, the reference to someone named Blackwood, it suggested a much more sophisticated criminal enterprise. Alexis had seen enough. She began to retreat, moving silently through the darkness. When a flash of headlights froze her in place, a pickup truck was approaching the sawmill, forcing her to duck behind a stack of rusting metal. From her hiding spot, she watched as 3 men exited the truck and unloaded a large crate, carrying it inside. The sawmill door opened fully, spilling light across the loading area, and Alexis caught a glimpse of the man supervising the delivery. Her heart stuttered. The man was in his mid-50s, tall and fit, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Though his hair was now silver at the temples and he wore expensive civilian clothes, she would recognize Colonel Raymond Blackwood anywhere. The former military officer who had coordinated the extraction of her team in Afghanistan. The man who had arrived too late to save Nathan and the others. The man whose decisions had always seemed just slightly off, just slightly delayed. Blackwood had left the military shortly after the ambush that killed her team, citing psychological trauma. Alexis had always harbored suspicions about his role in the disaster, but grief and guilt had overwhelmed any desire to investigate further. Now seeing him here coordinating with a criminal organization targeting her new home, old doubts crystallized into new suspicions. This couldn't be coincidence. A twig snapped beneath her foot, the sound impossibly loud in the night silence. "What was that?" one of the sentries called out, scanning the darkness. Alexis froze, heart pounding, as a flashlight beam swept the area around her hiding place. She needed to move, but any movement would expose her position. The beam inched closer to her location. "Probably a coyote," another voice replied. "Been seeing them all week." The flashlight hesitated, then redirected away from Alexis's position. "Guess so." Alexis remained motionless until the men returned inside the heavy door closing behind them. Then she retreated through the shadows, her mind racing with implications. The Iron Wolves weren't just a local problem. They were connected to Blackwood, who was clearly orchestrating something bigger than a simple protection racket. And if Blackwood recognized her, if he realized who was in Granite Falls, she needed answers, and she needed them fast. But first, she needed to warn Edwin. Whatever Harding had planned, it would happen soon. Alexis arrived at Whiskey River just before opening to find several regular patrons already gathered outside, their expressions grim. Inside, Edwin was sweeping up shattered glass, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "What happened?" she demanded, surveying the damaged broken bottles behind the bar, overturned tables, a splintered chair. "Iron Wolves paid us a visit last night, after you left," Edwin explained, leaning heavily on the broom. "Made quite a mess." "Are you hurt? Where's Emily?" "I'm fine. Emily's at the motel. I made her promise to stay there until this blows over." He gestured at the destruction. "Said this was just a sample of what happens to businesses that don't cooperate. Sheriff Garrett took a report. Said his hands are tied as always." Alexis's jaw tightened as she assessed the damage more carefully, noting the methodical nature of the destruction. This wasn't random vandalism, but a calculated display of power. "Edwin, I need to tell you something." She explained what she had observed at the sawmill, leaving out her recognition of Blackwood for the moment. As she spoke, Edwin's expression shifted from resignation to concern. "Drugs and weapons. That's a federal case, Alexis. We should call the FBI, let them handle this. It would take weeks to build a case, and the Iron Wolves would be long gone along with any chance of proving Blackwood is involved," Alexis argued. "We need evidence. Solid evidence no one can ignore." Edwin studied her face. "Alexis, what aren't you telling me? Who's this Blackwood character to you?" Before she could answer, the door opened and Dylan Westbrook walked in. At 40, Dylan had the lean, muscular build of a man who worked with his hands for a living, his features ruggedly handsome beneath a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. His resemblance to Nathan was striking, the same intelligent eyes, the same determined set to his jaw. "Heard about the trouble," he said, setting a small duffel bag down. "Came to help with repairs." Alexis tensed involuntarily. In the chaos of the past 24 hours, she had forgotten about Dylan's appearance at the bar, his claim to be Nathan's brother, his knowledge of her past. "Appreciate it, Dylan," Edwin said. "Could use the help." Dylan nodded at Alexis. "Miss Morgan." "Mr. Westbrook," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. An awkward silence fell, broken when the door banged open again and 2 Iron Wolves strode in, followed by Carter, whose face still bore the evidence of their alley encounter. "Bar's closed," Edwin announced, straightening to his full height, despite his advanced years. Carter smirked. "Not for us, old man." He surveyed the destruction with satisfaction. "Looks like you need some renovations." Dylan stepped forward, intimidating in his quiet intensity. "You heard him. Bar's closed. Back off, pretty boy. This isn't your business." "I'm making it my business," Dylan replied evenly. Carter's hand drifted toward his waistband, the bulge of a concealed weapon apparent beneath his cut. "That right?" Alexis moved between them, acutely aware of the potential for violence to spiral out of control. "What do you want?" she asked Carter directly. "Boss wants to see you." He pointed at Alexis. "Just you." "That's not happening," Edwin interjected. Alexis raised a hand to quiet him. "Where?" "Out back, black SUV." Alexis weighed her options. Refusing would likely escalate the situation, potentially endangering Edwin and Dylan. Going alone was risky, but she was confident in her ability to handle herself. and this might be an opportunity to gather more information about Blackwood. "I'll be right out," she agreed. "Alexis Imambia," Edwin began, but she cut him off with a look. "It's okay. I've got this." She followed the Iron Wolves outside to where a black Escalade idled in the alley behind Whiskey River. One of the men opened the rear door, revealing Vincent Harding seated inside, looking incongruously sophisticated in a tailored suit rather than his leather cut. "Ms. Morgan," he greeted her. "Please join me." Alexis slid into the seat across from him, leaving the door open a small precaution to prevent an immediate abduction. "Impressive display yesterday," Harding said without preamble. "Most people don't walk away from confrontations with my men. Most people aren't me. Clearly." He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "I've been making inquiries about you. Alexis Morgan, or should I call you Sergeant Morgan?" Alexis kept her expression neutral, though her mind was racing. They had found her service record. "Former Sergeant U.S. Army," Harding continued. "Honorable discharge following an incident in Afghanistan. Highly decorated combat experienced." He leaned forward. "But the interesting part is how much of your record is redacted. Why is that, I wonder?" "What do you want, Harding?" He gestured expansively. "Direct. I like that." His expression turned serious. "What I want is simple. This town has resources we need. Businesses that can provide services, transportation routes, locations for certain operations. We're here to stay. Sergeant Morgan and Whiskey River fits into our plans. Reed's Bar fits into this, how? The location is strategic, and liquor licenses are useful for laundering certain funds." Harding studied her thoughtfully. "But you're an unexpected complication. A woman with your skills could be problematic for my operation, or beneficial." Alexis raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job? Call it an opportunity. Your military background, your obvious capabilities, these are qualities I value. Join us, and I'll make sure Thompson and his precious bar remain untouched." "Refuse." He shrugged. "Well, I think the message from last night was clear. You're wasting your time. I'm not interested." Harding's expression hardened. "Everyone has a price, Sergeant. A pressure point." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph, sliding it across the seat to her. Alexis stiffened as she recognized it. Emily Reed, clearly photographed without her knowledge, walking from the motel to her car. "Pretty girl," Harding commented casually. "Pre-med at UCLA, I hear. Shame if something happened to derail such a promising future." His cold fury swept through Alexis, but she maintained her composure through years of discipline. "Threatening a young woman. How very brave of you." "Not a threat. Insurance." Harding took back the photograph. "You have until tomorrow to decide. Work with us and everyone stays safe. Fight us." His smile returned colder than before. "Well, we both know how that ends. Are we done, for now?" Harding nodded toward the door. "Think carefully, Sergeant. There are no heroes in this world, only survivors." Alexis exited the vehicle, watching as it pulled away from the alley. Her mind was already calculating, planning, weighing options that had nothing to do with acceptance and everything to do with elimination of threats. Back inside Whiskey River, Edwin and Dylan were waiting anxiously. "What did he want?" Edwin demanded. "What they always want," Alexis replied grimly. "Control compliance." She turned to Dylan. "How good are you at getting information out of people who don't want to share it?" Dylan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Depends on the people." "Why?" "Because we need to know more about the Iron Wolves operation, and I think I know how to find out." Alexis glanced at Edwin. "But first we need to move Emily somewhere safe. Somewhere the Iron Wolves don't know about." "My cabin," Dylan offered immediately. Off the grid 20 miles into the national forest. No one knows about it, except family. Alexis nodded, a plan forming in her mind. Perfect. What are you thinking? Edwin asked, concern evident in his voice. I'm not running anymore, Alexis replied, her expression hardening with resolve. These people threaten my home, my friends. It's time to push back. Dylan studied her with newfound interest, as if seeing her for the first time. Who are you really? Alexis met his gaze, making a decision that would change everything. Someone who's tired of watching bullies win. Someone who's done letting the past dictate the future. She paused. Someone who knows exactly how to stop people like Harding and Blackwood. The promise of violence hung in the air between them, unspoken, but understood. Alexis Morgan, the quiet bartender with a hidden past, had served her purpose. Now Sergeant Alexis Morgan would complete the mission. The first rays of morning light filtered through the pine trees surrounding Dylan's cabin, casting long shadows across the clearing. Alexis sat on the front porch steps, a steaming mug of coffee warming her hands against the mountain chill. Inside, Edwin and Emily slept as safe as she could make them for now. She heard the cabin door open behind her, followed by Dylan's measured footsteps. "You didn't sleep," he said, settling beside her on the steps. It wasn't a question. She'd spent the night alternating between patrol circuits of the perimeter and sitting in the old rocking chair by the window, watching the darkness for threats. "Old habits," she replied, not looking at him. Dylan studied her profile, the resemblance to his brother momentarily stealing his breath. Not in her features, Alexis was all sharp angles and wary eyes, where Nathan had been open smiles and steady confidence, but in the way she held herself. The vigilance, the sense of responsibility. "We need to talk about Nathan," he said finally. Alexis's grip tightened around her mug. "I told you what happened. You told me the official story, the same story I read in the redacted report. My brother and his team walked into an ambush. Only one survivor, unnamed." Dylan's voice remained calm, but beneath it ran a current of tightly controlled emotion. "But I know my brother. Nathan wouldn't have made those mistakes, not unless he was set up." "What are you saying?" "I think Blackwood deliberately sent Nathan's team into that valley knowing what was waiting for them." He watched her face carefully. "And I think you've suspected the same thing for 5 years." Alexis stared out at the trees, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. Dylan's words brought her nightmare back, with crystal clarity. The explosion, the gunfire, Nathan's final order. But this time, the memory continued past where her dreams usually ended to the debriefing afterward. To Blackwood's practiced sympathy, the convenient explanations, the questions that were never properly answered. Why would Blackwood want Nathan's team dead, she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Because Nathan was investigating him. Dylan pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I found this in Nathan's things after we got his personal effects back. Most of it is in code, but I managed to piece some of it together. He believed Blackwood was involved in arms trafficking, redirecting military equipment that was supposed to be destroyed or returned from Afghanistan." Alexis took the notebook, flipping through pages of Nathan's neat handwriting. Notes, dates, cargo manifests, with certain items circled. It matched what she'd seen at the sawmill, military-grade weapons that should have been under strict control. "Nathan must have gotten too close," Dylan continued, "and Blackwood eliminated the threat." The implication hung in the air between them. If true, it meant Alexis hadn't just failed to protect her team. They had been deliberately sacrificed with no chance of success from the beginning. "I need proof," she said, finally closing the notebook. "Concrete evidence connecting Blackwood to the ambush to these weapons shipments. That's why I've been looking for you. I've spent 5 years tracking Blackwood, following paper trails, interviewing former colleagues. But I couldn't get close enough to gather solid evidence. Dylan's eyes met hers. Until now. Until I found you, the one person who survived, who might know enough to help me bring him down. Alexis handed the notebook back. If what you're saying is true, Blackwood is dangerous in ways you don't understand. We need to be careful. Strategic. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. Alexis stood brushing dust from her jeans. You didn't see what I saw last night. The Iron Wolves aren't just a local gang. They're well-armed, well-funded, and connected to something bigger. Blackwood isn't running a small-time operation here. He's building an empire. Dylan rose to join her. Then we tear it down. Together. Alexis studied him, the determination in his stance, the barely contained anger beneath his calm exterior. He looked so much like Nathan in that moment that it physically hurt. First, we need more information, she said, turning back toward the cabin. About the Iron Wolves, about their operation, about what Blackwood is planning. And then, she paused, her hand on the door. Then, we do what's necessary. Emily Reed stood in the small kitchen of Dylan's cabin, watching through the window as Alexis and Dylan conferred on the porch. Their body language spoke volumes, the careful distance between them, the tension in their shoulders, the way Alexis seemed to vibrate with contained energy like a coiled spring. As a psychology resident specializing in trauma, Emily recognized the signs, the hypervigilance, the emotional detachment, the practiced control that could shatter at any moment. Classic symptoms of PTSD. For 4 years, she'd observed Alexis from a distance during her visits home from medical school. The bartender had always been kind, but reserved, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. Emily had respected her boundaries, even as her professional training had identified the hidden wounds. Now, watching Alexis move with military precision, seeing the lethal grace with which she had confronted the Iron Wolves, Emily understood that there was far more to her father's employee than anyone in Granite Falls had suspected. The front door opened and Alexis entered, followed by Dylan. Emily turned from the window, busying herself with the coffee pot. "Dad's still sleeping," she said, pouring 2 fresh cups. "First time I've seen him rest properly in days." Alexis accepted the offered coffee with a nod of thanks. "He should stay here where it's safe. You too." "While you do what exactly?" Emily challenged gently. "Take on an entire motorcycle gang by yourselves." "You don't need to worry about that," Dylan interjected. "We have a plan." Emily set her cup down with deliberate care. "I think I deserve to know what's happening, considering those men threatened my father and his business." Alexis and Dylan exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Fine," Alexis conceded, "but this stays between us. Your father doesn't need the additional stress." Over the next half hour, they outlined what they knew the Iron Wolves' protection racket was merely a front for a sophisticated operation involving weapons trafficking, likely drugs as well. Blackwood, a former military officer, appeared to be coordinating these activities from behind the scenes. "We need more intelligence," Alexis explained. "Concrete evidence of illegal activities that we can take to federal authorities." "And you're planning to gather this evidence, how?" Emily asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The Iron Wolves are hosting a gathering tonight at the Broken Spoke Roadhouse," Dylan said. "Members from other chapters, potential buyers. It's our chance to identify key players, maybe even get a lead on their next shipment." Emily frowned. "That sounds incredibly dangerous. These men have already shown they're violent." "We'll be careful," Alexis assured her, though her tone lacked conviction. Emily studied them both, Dylan driven by what appeared to be a personal vendetta. Alexis haunted by something she couldn't quite identify yet. Neither seemed to fully grasp the recklessness of their plan. "Let me help," she said suddenly. Alexis shook her head. "Absolutely not." "I'm not suggesting I join your reconnaissance mission," Emily clarified. "But I have access to medical records at the hospital where I'm doing my residency. Many of the Iron Wolves have likely been treated there at some point: bar fights, motorcycle accidents. I might be able to gather information that could be useful." Dylan looked interested, but Alexis remained skeptical. "That's confidential information," she pointed out. "You could lose your medical license." Emily met her gaze steadily. "And you could lose your life. I think I can live with bending some privacy rules if it helps keep you and my father safe." Something shifted in Alexis's expression, a brief softening, a flash of respect, quickly hidden behind her usual mask of control. "Look for any connections to military service," she said after a moment, "especially special forces or intelligence backgrounds, and any mentions of a man named Blackwood in their personal information." Emily nodded. "I can do that. Just promise me you'll be careful tonight." "We will," Dylan assured her, though Alexis remained silent, her eyes distant, already planning their next move. The Broken Spoke Roadhouse sat just outside the county line, a sprawling, single-story building with a dirt parking lot currently filled with motorcycles and pickup trucks. Neon beer signs glowed in the windows, and the heavy thump of rock music spilled out each time the door opened. Alexis and Dylan sat in his truck parked on a hill overlooking the roadhouse, observing through binoculars. They had been there for 2 hours, documenting arrivals, identifying patterns in security. "At least 30 Iron Wolves patches," Dylan noted, plus another dozen or so from allied clubs. Alexis focused on a group of men standing apart from the others, their bearing distinctly different from the typical bikers. "Those 4 by the side entrance, they're military, or ex-military. Look at their positioning, the way they scan the perimeter." Dylan adjusted his binoculars. "Blackwood's personal security." "Possibly." She lowered her binoculars as a black Escalade pulled into the lot. "There's Harding." Vincent Harding emerged from the SUV accompanied by 2 men who flanked him like bodyguards. He exchanged greetings with several Iron Wolves before disappearing inside the roadhouse. "Still no sign of Blackwood," Dylan said, frustration evident in his voice. "He won't show his face at a public gathering like this. Too exposed." Alexis checked her watch. "We need a closer look. The real business won't happen in the main bar." They had prepared carefully for this operation, both dressed to blend in, Dylan in worn jeans boots and a leather jacket. Alexis in tight black pants, a tank top, and a denim jacket, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. They looked like any other couple out for a night of drinking and dancing, not federal fugitives conducting surveillance. "Back entrance," Dylan suggested. Alexis nodded. "Through the kitchen. Most of these places have high turnover for dishwashers. No one will question us if we move with purpose." They drove down from their observation point, parking among the other vehicles. As they approached the roadhouse, Alexis felt the familiar calm of operational focus settling over her. This was the world she understood: objective assessment, risk calculation, tactical execution. The kitchen door was propped open by a milk crate, a cook smoking just outside. They waited until he flicked his cigarette away and returned inside, then slipped through the door behind him. The kitchen was chaotic, steaming grills, harried staff shouting orders. Alexis grabbed an apron from a hook, tossing another to Dylan. They moved with confidence through the kitchen, nodding to the staff, as if they belonged. In the main bar, the noise hit them like a physical wall music, blaring from speakers, dozens of conversations competing to be heard over the din. The crack of pool balls from tables in the corner. Iron Wolves members dominated the space, their leather cuts marking them as the controlling presence. Alexis scanned the room, identifying exits, threats, potential allies if things went wrong. Her gaze settled on a hallway guarded by one of the men she had identified as ex-military. That would be where the real business was conducted. She leaned close to Dylan, her lips near his ear to be heard over the music. "Private rooms down that hall. We need a distraction." Dylan nodded, understanding immediately. He made his way to the bar, while Alexis circled toward the pool tables, establishing a clear sight line to the guarded hallway. The distraction came 5 minutes later, a carefully engineered confrontation between Dylan and a drunk biker over a spilled drink. Voices raised, men gathered around, and in the confusion, the guard at the hallway moved forward to assist. Alexis slipped past, moving with quiet efficiency, until she reached a door at the end of the hallway. Voices came from inside one of them, unmistakably Harding's. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, straining to hear. "Shipment arrives tomorrow night. Usual drop point." Harding's voice was clear, businesslike, and Blackwood's confident about the security. Another voice, unfamiliar. "He's taking personal oversight of this one. After the Denver incident, he's not taking chances." The buyers are nervous. That kind of merchandise attracts attention. The buyers should worry about their money, not our security. Blackwood's operation is airtight. Alexis's mind raced. A shipment tomorrow night. But of what and where? A sudden silence from the main bar made her tense. The distraction had ended too quickly. She needed to move. As she turned to retreat, the door opened, and she found herself face to face with Vincent Harding and 3 other men. For a split second, everyone froze. Then recognition dawned in Harding's eyes. "Well, well, Sergeant Morgan, I was wondering if you'd take my offer." His smile was predatory. "Though I think you misunderstood the terms." Alexis assessed her options in an instant. 4 opponents, confined space, no immediate backup. The odds were poor, but she'd faced worse. "Just getting a feel for the operation before I commit," she said, buying seconds to position herself. Harding wasn't fooled. "Grab her!" The first man lunged forward. Alexis caught his outstretched arm, using his momentum to slam him into the wall, with enough force to crack the drywall. The second received a precision strike to the throat that dropped him to his knees, gasping for air. Harding himself drew a pistol, but Alexis was already moving, closing the distance before he could aim properly. She caught his wrist, forcing the weapon upward as it discharged the bullet, embedding itself in the ceiling. With her free hand, she delivered a brutal strike to his solar plexus, doubling him over. The fourth man, more cautious than his companions, circled behind her. Alexis sensed rather than saw his approach, spinning to block his attack, but not before he landed a solid blow to her ribs. Pain flared, but she channeled it, using it to fuel her counterattack. A vicious combination of strikes that ended with him unconscious on the floor. Harding had recovered enough to raise his gun again. This time, Alexis didn't try to disarm him. Instead, she swept his legs, sending him crashing to the ground, the pistol skittering across the floor. The gunshot had not gone unnoticed. Shouts came from the main bar, heavy footsteps approaching rapidly. Alexis retrieved the fallen pistol and moved to the window at the end of the hallway. It was small, but she could fit through. As she forced it open, she glanced back at Harding, who was struggling to his feet. "Tell Blackwood I said hello," she said, then slipped through the window into the night. Dylan was waiting in the truck, engine running, when Alexis emerged from the shadows behind the roadhouse. She slid into the passenger seat, wincing as the movement aggravated her injured ribs. "Go!" she ordered, and he accelerated away, headlights off, until they reached the main road. "What happened? I heard a gunshot." "Ran into Harding. Had to improvise an exit strategy." Alexis checked the side mirror, confirming they weren't being followed yet. "But I got what we needed." There's a shipment coming in tomorrow night. Weapons. They didn't specify, but given the security concerns, I'd say it's significant. She grimaced, pressing a hand to her side. We need to get back to the cabin, warn Edwin and Emily. After tonight, the Iron Wolves will be looking for all of us. Dylan glanced at her, noting the way she held herself stiffly. You're hurt. I've had worse. The drive back to the cabin was tense, both watching for signs of pursuit. Alexis used the time to process what she'd learned. Blackwood was personally overseeing the upcoming shipment, which meant it was important, perhaps important enough, to draw him into the open where they could gather evidence against him. By the time they reached the cabin, Emily was waiting anxiously on the porch, alerted by the sound of their approach. Her eyes widened as Alexis limped from the truck. "What happened?" she demanded, rushing to support her. "Minor disagreement," Alexis replied, allowing Emily to help her inside. In the cabin's small living room, Edwin sat by the fire, his weathered face lined with worry. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Partly," Dylan answered, securing the door behind them. "There's a shipment coming tomorrow night. We think it's weapons." Emily guided Alexis to the couch. "Let me see your ribs." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. You can barely stand straight." Emily's tone brooked no argument. "I'm a doctor, remember? Or nearly one. Let me help." After a moment's hesitation, Alexis relented, carefully removing her jacket and lifting her tank top to reveal an angry bruise spreading across her right side. Emily probed gently, her touch clinical but compassionate. "2 bruised ribs, maybe a hairline fracture. Nothing broken, at least. You need to rest, ice it." "We don't have time for that." Alexis pulled her shirt back down. "Harding saw me. They'll be looking for us now. We need to move." "Not until I've wrapped those ribs," Emily insisted. "And you've told us exactly what you heard." While Emily retrieved first aid supplies from her bag, Alexis and Dylan recounted what they'd learned at the roadhouse, the shipment, Blackwood's personal involvement, the mention of nervous buyers. "Did they say where the drop would happen?" Edwin asked. Alexis shook her head. "Just the usual drop point, but I have an idea where that might be. When I was watching the sawmill, I noticed a clearing about a mile north. It would be perfect for a helicopter landing or a discreet truck transfer." Emily returned with bandages and began wrapping Alexis's ribs with practiced efficiency. "And what exactly is your plan to stake out this clearing and hope Blackwood appears?" "We need evidence," Dylan explained. "Photos, recordings, something concrete, linking Blackwood to illegal weapons trafficking. Then we can take it to the FBI. And if they catch you..." Emily's hands stilled momentarily. "These aren't just bikers anymore. They're organized criminals with military training." Alexis met her concerned gaze. "I've dealt with worse." "Have you?" Emily challenged quietly. "Or are you just telling yourself that because it's easier than admitting you're not invincible?" The question hit closer to home than Alexis cared to admit. For years, she had pushed her body beyond its limits, ignored injuries, suppressed fear. It was what made her an effective operator. But it had also isolated her, cut her off from normal human connection. "I appreciate the concern," she said finally. "But this is what I do, what I was trained for." Emily finished wrapping the bandages in silence, her expression troubled. When she spoke again, her voice was low enough that only Alexis could hear. "Being trained for something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it forever. There are other ways to live, Alexis." Before Alexis could respond, Dylan's phone rang. He answered, his expression growing increasingly concerned as he listened. "When?" he asked then. "Are you sure?" "All right, thanks for the heads up." He ended the call, turning to the others. That was my contact at the sheriff's department. They just found Carter's body in the woods outside town. Execution style. Alexis frowned. Harding Cleaning House. More likely Blackwood, Dillon replied. Carter was there when you confronted Harding. He knew your face, your capabilities. He was a liability. The implications were clear. Blackwood was eliminating potential witnesses tying up loose ends. If he was willing to kill one of his own men, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened his operation. We need to move, Alexis decided, rising from the couch despite Emily's protests. This cabin may be secluded, but it's not secure enough if they're actively hunting us. Where can we go? Edwin asked. If they're willing to kill their own people, nowhere in Granite Falls is safe. Dillon considered this. I have a contact in Denver. Former Marine runs a security firm. He can provide safe houses, equipment, whatever we need. Denver puts us too far from the drop point, Alexis countered. We need to stay close if we want to document the shipment. There's an old hunting lodge near Morrison Lake, Edwin suggested. Belonged to my brother before he passed. No one's used it in years, but it should be habitable. And it's only about 10 miles from the sawmill. Does anyone else know about it? Alexis asked. Edwin shook his head. Just family. Even the property records are still in my brother's name. It'll do for now, Alexis decided. Dillon, call your contact in Denver. We'll need surveillance equipment, weapons, if he can get them legally. Emily, pack only essentials. We move in 30 minutes. As the others prepared to leave, Alexis stepped outside onto the porch, needing a moment alone to think. The night was clear, stars scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds on a jeweler's cloth. In the distance, an owl called its mournful cry echoing through the trees. She heard the door open behind her, followed by Emily's soft footsteps. I found something, Emily said, joining her at the railing. At the hospital, patient records for several Iron Wolves members. Alexis turned suddenly alert. Anything useful? Maybe. Emily handed her a folded paper. 3 of them listed the same emergency contact, a company called Archimedes Security Consulting. I looked it up. It's registered to a shell corporation, but the business address is a building owned by Raymond Blackwood. Alexis unfolded the paper, scanning the information Emily had gathered. Archimedes, she repeated softly. In Greek mythology, he was the mathematician who developed weapons of war. There's more, Emily continued. One of the Iron Wolves was admitted last month after a motorcycle accident. He was delirious from pain medication, talking about something called Operation Archimedes. The nurse made a note because he became agitated, saying it would change everything. A cold weight settled in Alexis's stomach. Operation Archimedes. A military designation for a covert mission. Did he say anything else? Any details about what this operation involves? Emily shook her head. Just that they wouldn't see it coming. The nurse thought he was hallucinating, or revealing something he wasn't supposed to know. Alexis folded the paper carefully, tucking it into her pocket. Thank you, Emily. This could be important. Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her since she'd watched Alexis confront the Iron Wolves. Who are you really? And don't say, just a soldier. I've worked with veterans. What I saw at the bar, that was something else. Alexis was silent for a long moment, weighing how much to reveal. Emily had risked her career to help them. She deserved some measure of truth. I was part of a specialized unit, she said finally. Officially, we didn't exist. We were deployed for operations too sensitive or too dangerous for conventional forces. And Nathan Cole Dillon's brother, my commanding officer, the best I ever served under. Alexis looked out at the darkness, seeing not the forest, but the dusty mountains of Afghanistan. He died saving my life, saving all of us. Except, he didn't save all of you, did he? Emily's voice was gentle but probing. You're the only one who made it back. The question pierced Alexis's carefully constructed defenses. For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing the raw pain beneath. No, she admitted quietly. I'm the only one, and sometimes I wish I hadn't. Emily's hand found hers on the railing, a simple human connection that Alexis hadn't allowed herself in years. Survivor's guilt is a normal response to trauma, but it doesn't mean you deserve to die with them. Doesn't it? Alexis withdrew her hand. I was the team's intelligence specialist. I should have seen the ambush coming. If I had, they'd still be alive. Or you all would have died together, Emily countered. You can't know that. Before Alexis could respond, Dylan appeared at the door. We're ready to move. Emily gave Alexis a last searching look before turning to join the others inside. Alexis remained on the porch for a moment longer, staring at the hand Emily had touched, feeling the lingering warmth of human connection. Then she buried the sensation deep, where it couldn't distract her from the mission ahead. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not until Blackwood was stopped. The hunting lodge was exactly as Edwin had described, rustic, isolated, and dusty from disuse. A single-story structure built of local stone and timber, it sat in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, with a narrow dirt track providing the only access. Inside, the furnishings were sparse but functional. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by worn leather chairs and a sagging couch. A small kitchen occupied one corner, its appliances outdated but serviceable. 2 bedrooms and a basic bathroom completed the layout. It's not much, Edwin apologized as they brought in their meager belongings. But it's secure. It's perfect, Alexis assured him, already assessing the defensive possibilities. Good sight lines through the windows, multiple exit points, thick stone walls that could withstand small arms fire if necessary. Dylan returned from his perimeter check, satisfaction evident in his expression. Dense forest on 3 sides, steep slope to the north. Anyone approaching would be visible long before they reached the clearing. And no cell service, Emily added, checking her phone. We're completely off the grid. That's both good and bad, Alexis noted. We can't be tracked, but we also can't call for help if needed. Dylan patted the satellite phone at his belt. My contact in Denver came through. We have secure communications, plus the surveillance equipment we need for tomorrow night. They settled in, establishing a watch rotation and preparing for what might be their only chance to gather evidence against Blackwood. As night deepened, Edwin and Emily retired to one bedroom, leaving Alexis and Dylan alone in the main room. You should rest, Dylan told her, noting the careful way she moved to protect her injured ribs. I'll take first watch. I'm fine. Alexis positioned herself by the window, gazing out at the moonlit clearing. Sleep doesn't come easily these days. Dylan studied her silhouette against the darkness. It hasn't since Korengal, has it? She didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Nathan had nightmares too, he continued quietly. After his first tour, he never talked about them, but I could hear him sometimes through the walls of our parents' house, shouting names I didn't recognize. Alexis closed her eyes briefly. Martinez, Jackson, Torres, they were from his first squad, lost in an IED attack outside Kandahar. You know a lot about him. He was my CO for 3 years. We went through hell together. She turned from the window, facing Dylan directly. What do you want from me? Confirmation that your brother was a hero? He was, the best of us. I want the truth, Dylan said simply, about what happened that day. about why the only survivor of an elite team has spent 5 years hiding in a small-town bar instead of continuing to serve. The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. Alexis could deflect as she had for years when anyone probed too deeply into her past. But Dylan deserved better than that. He was Nathan's brother, and he had committed himself to their dangerous course of action. After the ambush, she began each word carefully chosen. After Nathan sacrificed himself, I held position with Martinez until the extraction team arrived. We were evacuated to Bagram, then to Germany. Martinez died of his wounds en route. I survived. She moved to the fireplace, staring into the dying embers. During debriefing, Blackwood made it clear that the official report would cite communication failures and unavoidable combat circumstances as the reason for delayed extraction. But I knew better. The extraction team had been ready, waiting just beyond the valley. They could have reached us within minutes of the ambush. But Blackwood held them back. Dylan finished the pieces, finally fitting together. Why? I don't know, not for certain. Alexis turned to face him. But I started asking questions. Uncomfortable questions about intelligence failures, about the delay in extraction, about why a high-value target would be in such an exposed position without additional security. And what happened? 2 days later, I was informed that my service record would be sealed due to the classified nature of our operations. I was offered an honorable discharge with full benefits on the condition that I never discuss the incident or my suspicions. Her mouth twisted in a bitter smile. The alternative was implied, but clear. If I persisted, my record could be altered to suggest operational failures on my part that led to the team's deaths. Dylan's expression hardened. They silenced you. They tried. I spent the next year gathering information, following paper trails, trying to connect Blackwood to arms dealers, opium traffickers, anyone who might have benefited from eliminating Nathan's team. But every lead went cold. Sources disappeared. Records were altered. Until you realized you were being watched. Alexis nodded. One night I returned to my apartment to find signs of entry, nothing obvious, just small things out of place. I knew then that they were onto me. That night, Alexis Morgan disappeared. I've been moving ever since, staying nowhere longer than a few months. Until Granite Falls. Why stop running there? She shrugged the motion, causing her to wince as it pulled at her injured ribs. I was tired. Edwin offered me a job, no questions asked. The town was small, isolated, seemingly disconnected from the world I'd left behind. A faint smile touched her lips. And the mountains reminded me of home. Dylan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. And now Blackwood has found you anyway. Through the Iron Wolves. I don't think he knew I was here, Alexis clarified. Not until recently. The Iron Wolves were established for another purpose, whatever this Operation Archimedes is. My presence is a complication he didn't anticipate. Which makes you even more dangerous to him. Dylan moved to the fireplace, adding another log to the dying flames. Tomorrow night, when this shipment arrives, we'll have our chance to gather evidence against him. To prove what he did to Nathan's team, to expose whatever he's planning now. Alexis nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. Even with evidence, could they bring down someone like Blackwood? A man with military connections, with the resources to establish a criminal empire, with the ruthlessness to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. But what choice did they have? If Operation Archimedes was as significant as it seemed, the consequences of failure might extend far beyond their personal vendetta against Blackwood. Get some rest, she told Dylan. Tomorrow will be high risk. We'll need to be at our best. After he reluctantly retired to the couch, Alexis remained by the window, maintaining her vigilant watch over the clearing. The night was peaceful, The only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze and the occasional call of a night bird. It was in quiet moments like these that the ghosts were loudest. Nathan's face determined and resigned as he ordered her to run. Martinez's labored breathing as she tried to stem the bleeding from his wounds. The faces of Torres and Jackson forever frozen in her memory as they lay motionless outside the shattered Humvee. "I'm close, Nate," she whispered to the darkness, "close to the truth, to justice." But even as she spoke the words, a different voice echoed in her mind. Emily's gentle challenge from earlier. Being trained for something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it forever. There are other ways to live. For the first time in years, Alexis allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder, where she could form connections without fear, where the weight of her past didn't define her every moment. It was a dangerous thought, the kind that created vulnerability distraction, the kind that got operatives killed in the field. She pushed it away, focusing instead on the mission parameters for tomorrow night, on the tactical approach to the drop site, on contingency plans if they were discovered. This was the world she understood, the only one she had left. The following day passed in careful preparation. Dylan's contact in Denver had provided them with high-quality surveillance equipment, night vision goggles, directional microphones, cameras with powerful zoom lenses. They studied satellite imagery of the area around the sawmill, identifying the most likely drop point and establishing optimal observation positions. Emily watched these preparations with growing concern, the professional part of her noting the way Alexis seemed to come alive in this environment, precise, focused her movements, economical and purposeful. This was a woman trained for combat, for covert operations. A woman who had spent years sublimating that part of herself behind a bar. When Alexis stepped outside to conduct another perimeter check, Emily followed, finding her standing at the edge of the clearing, scanning the tree line with methodical attention. "You don't have to do this," Emily said without preamble. Alexis didn't turn. "Yes, I do." "Why? Because you feel responsible for what happened to Nathan's team. Because you think this will somehow balance the scales." "Because Blackwood is dangerous," Alexis replied, her voice level. "Whatever he's planning with Operation Archimedes, people will get hurt. I can't walk away from that." Emily moved to stand beside her. "That's not the only reason, though, is it? This is also about redemption, about trying to fix the past." Alexis finally turned to face her eyes hard. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? I've spent the last 3 years working with veterans suffering from PTSD. I've seen what unresolved trauma does to people, how it makes them take risks, push themselves beyond reasonable limits trying to prove something to themselves or to the ghosts they carry. This isn't about psychology, Emily. It's about stopping a criminal before he hurts more people." "It can be both," Emily insisted gently. "You can want justice and still be driven by your own need for absolution. The two aren't mutually exclusive." Alexis stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to acknowledge that this mission isn't just about Blackwood. It's about you. About what happened in Afghanistan. About the fact that you survived when others didn't." "And if I do, what then?" Alexis's voice held a dangerous edge. "Does that change anything? Does it bring Nathan back? Does it stop Blackwood?" "No," Emily admitted. "But it might help you see more clearly. Make decisions based on strategy rather than guilt. And maybe, just maybe, it allows you to consider a future after this is over." The words struck closer to home than Emily could know, echoing Alexis's own thoughts from the previous night. For a brief moment, the mask slipped, revealing the wounded woman beneath the soldier's exterior. I don't know how to live with it, Alexis confessed so quietly that Emily had to strain to hear. Every day I wake up and remember that I'm here and they're not, that I failed them. Emily reached out her hand, hovering near Alexis's arm, before gently settling on her shoulder. You survived. That's not failure. And Nathan made a choice to save you, to give you a chance. Don't waste that by throwing your life away on a mission that might get you killed. Before Alexis could respond, Dylan emerged from the lodge equipment bag slung over his shoulder. It's time, he called. We need to get in position before dark. Emily's hand fell away as Alexis straightened her moment of vulnerability, already hidden behind the professional mask. Be careful, Emily urged. Both of you. Alexis nodded once, then moved to join Dylan, her stride purposeful, her focus narrowing to the mission ahead. But Emily's words lingered, an unwelcome distraction in a situation that demanded complete concentration. As they departed in Dylan's truck, Emily watched from the porch, a sense of foreboding settling over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this night would change everything, for better or worse. The forest was silent as darkness fell, the only sounds the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a hunting owl. Alexis and Dylan had positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the clearing north of the sawmill, their observation post concealed among dense underbrush. Through night vision goggles, Alexis surveyed the scene below. The clearing was empty, save for a few iron wolves sentries positioned at its edges, their posture betraying their military training. These weren't ordinary bikers, but professionals likely former special forces or military intelligence. 2 at the north edge, 3 on the eastern approach, she whispered to Dylan, who was setting up a directional microphone aimed at the center of the clearing. All armed, maintaining proper security protocols. Dylan nodded, making a minor adjustment to the microphone. Whatever's coming in tonight, it's high value. And likely illegal enough to warrant this level of security. Alexis checked her watch. Based on the activity at the roadhouse, the shipment should arrive within the hour. They settled into watchful silence, the waiting game familiar to both of them from their respective military backgrounds. Minutes stretched into a half-hour, then an hour with no change in the scene below, except the occasional rotation of sentries. Something's wrong, Alexis murmured, unease prickling along her spine. They should have been here by now. Dylan frowned, checking the satellite phone. No messages from my contact. No alerts about law enforcement activity that might have delayed them. A soft electronic tone from the directional microphone drew their attention. Dylan adjusted the headphones, listening intently. Chatter on their comms, he reported. Something about a change in plans. The delivery's been diverted to an alternate location. Alexis cursed softly. Blackwood must have suspected surveillance. He's adapting his approach. Can you make out where they're going? Dylan shook his head. Too fragmented. Just that the package is being rerouted to secondary containment, and that Blackwood wants personal confirmation of delivery. Alexis weighed their options. They could remain in position hoping for additional information, or they could fall back and regroup. The decision was made for them when headlights appeared at the edge of the clearing, a black Escalade pulling to a stop near the center. Vincent Harding emerged, accompanied by 2 guards. He spoke briefly with the sentries, then scanned the surrounding forest, his gaze passing over their position without pausing. He's looking for something, Dylan whispered. Or someone. The microphone picked up Harding's voice, distorted but intelligible. Sweep the perimeter again. Blackwood is certain they'll be watching. Alexis tensed. They know we're here. We need to move. Now. They began disassembling their equipment with practiced efficiency, but before they could retreat, a new sound reached them, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors approaching from the east. That wasn't part of the plan, Dylan muttered hastily, packing the directional microphone. Alexis peered through the night vision goggles as a sleek black helicopter appeared over the tree line, its running lights off, moving with the precision of a military aircraft, rather than a civilian model. It hovered briefly over the clearing, before setting down with minimal noise, its rotors slowing, but not stopping the classic posture of a drop that needed to be executed quickly. The side door slid open, and a figure emerged, silhouetted against the helicopter's interior lights. Even from a distance, Alexis recognized the military bearing, the confident stride. "Blackwood," she breathed, adjusting the zoom on her goggles to capture his face clearly. Raymond Blackwood looked much as she remembered him, tall, imposing, his silver hair cut in the same precise style he had favored during his military career. He wore tactical gear rather than a uniform now, but his bearing remained that of a commanding officer as he greeted Harding with a curt nod. Alexis raised her camera, capturing images of the meeting, zooming in to document Blackwood's presence clearly. This was the evidence they needed: proof that the former colonel was personally involved in whatever illegal operation the Iron Wolves were conducting. From the helicopter, two men emerged carrying a metal case between them. Not a large weapons shipment, as they had expected, but something smaller, more contained. Something valuable enough to warrant Blackwood's personal attention. "What is that?" Dylan whispered, peering through binoculars. "I don't know," Alexis admitted. "But whatever it is, it's the key to Operation Archimedes." As they watched Blackwood supervise the transfer of the case to Harding's Escalade, checking its contents before allowing it to be secured in the vehicle. The entire operation took less than 5 minutes, a textbook military extraction, minimizing exposure time. Alexis continued documenting the scene, her camera capturing clear images of Blackwood, directing the operation, handling what appeared to be highly sensitive material. This was the smoking gun they needed: irrefutable evidence linking him to illegal activities. The helicopter's rotors began to spin faster, preparing for departure. Blackwood exchanged a few final words with Harding, then turned to reboard the aircraft. In that moment, as he faced the ridge where they were concealed, Blackwood paused. His head tilted slightly, his gaze sweeping the tree line with the calculated precision of a predator sensing prey. Then, impossibly, his eyes seemed to lock directly on their position. A cold wave of recognition washed over Alexis. He couldn't possibly see them; they were well concealed using proper fieldcraft techniques. And yet, his posture suggested otherwise. Blackwood raised a hand, pointing directly at their hiding spot, and spoke to the men beside him. "We've been made," Alexis hissed. "Move!" They abandoned their remaining equipment, retreating into the dense forest, as shouts echoed from the clearing below. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, and the sound of men crashing through the underbrush confirmed their worst fears. A pursuit team was already mobilizing. "Split up," Alexis ordered as they reached a small stream. "I'll draw them east. You circle back to the truck. If I'm not there in 30 minutes, leave without me." "That's not happening," Dylan objected. "We stay together. This isn't a debate." Alexis handed him the camera. "This is the evidence. It needs to reach the FBI regardless of what happens to me." Before he could protest further, she was moving deliberately, making enough noise to attract attention as she headed east, away from their planned extraction route. The pursuit team responded exactly as she had anticipated, the majority of the flashlight beams converging on her position. Alexis ran with controlled precision, using the terrain to her advantage, leading her pursuers deeper into the forest, while maintaining enough distance to avoid capture. It was a tactic she had employed in hostile territory before, become the prey that's just visible enough to chase, but too elusive to catch. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew more scattered as the Iron Wolves spread out, trying to flank her. She adjusted her route accordingly, doubling back when possible, crossing the stream multiple times to confuse her trail. After 15 minutes of this deadly game, she paused in the shadow of a massive pine, controlling her breathing as she listened for signs of pursuit. The forest had grown quieter, the flashlight beams more distant. She had successfully drawn them away from Dylan's escape route. Now she needed to make her own way back to the extraction point. Alexis began moving west using natural cover and staying low to avoid detection. She had nearly reached the road when a figure stepped out from behind a tree directly in her path, the moonlight revealing a familiar face. "Hello, Sergeant Morgan," Raymond Blackwood said calmly, his pistol aimed steadily at her chest. "It's been a long time." "You look well for a ghost," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone Alexis remembered from Afghanistan. "Though I suppose we're both ghosts in our own way." Alexis assessed her options with cold precision. The distance between them 12 feet. Too far to close before he could fire. The terrain uneven with limited cover. The weapon standard military-issue sidearm, likely a Sig Sauer. Her chances of survival, if she attempted to flee or attack, minimal. "Lower your weapons, Sergeant," Blackwood ordered. "I'd prefer not to shoot you." Again. The casual reference to Afghanistan sent a jolt through Alexis's system. She had taken a bullet in the thigh during the extraction, a wound she had always attributed to the Taliban fighters, but Blackwood's words suggested otherwise. "It was you," she said, the pieces suddenly fitting together. "You shot me during the extraction." A thin smile crossed Blackwood's face. "A regrettable necessity. You were asking too many questions even then. I couldn't risk you connecting the dots. And now we're having a long overdue conversation." He gestured with the pistol. "Walk. That way. Slowly." With no viable alternative, Alexis complied, her mind racing through potential escape scenarios as Blackwood directed her toward a black SUV parked on a narrow Forest Service road. 2 armed men stood beside it, their posture and vigilance marking them as former military. "Where's Westbrook?" Blackwood asked as they approached. "Nathan Cole's brother was with you at the ridge. My men lost track of him." Alexis remained silent, which earned her a knowing nod from Blackwood. "Loyalty. I always admired that about you, Morgan." He opened the rear door of the SUV. "Get in." The interior was luxurious leather seats, privacy glass, the subtle hum of an armored vehicle. Blackwood slid in beside her, keeping the pistol trained on her midsection, while one of the men took the driver's seat. The other remained outside, presumably continuing the search for Dylan. As the vehicle began moving through the forest, Alexis studied Blackwood more carefully. 5 years had added more silver to his hair, more lines around his eyes, but his bearing remained that of a battlefield commander, confident, controlled, accustomed to power. "You've been watching me," she said, breaking the silence. "For how long?" "Since Granite Falls," Blackwood replied. "Though I didn't know it was you at first. The Iron Wolves reported a bartender with unusual combat skills. It piqued my interest." "And Vincent Harding, he works for you. With me," Blackwood corrected. "Vincent understands the bigger picture, the necessity of what we're doing." "Which is what exactly? Arms trafficking, drug running, or is Operation Archimedes something more ambitious?" At the mention of Archimedes, Blackwood's expression sharpened. "You've been busy, but you've only scratched the surface." He studied her for a moment. "You never were one to leave a mission incomplete, were you, Sergeant? Even now, years later, you're still hunting for answers about what happened in Korengal." "I know what happened," Alexis replied, her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "You sacrificed my team. You delayed the extraction deliberately. What I don't know is why." The SUV turned onto a paved road, accelerating as they left the forest behind. Through the tinted windows, Alexis could see they were heading east toward the more developed areas near Denver. "Your team wasn't supposed to die," Blackwood said after a long pause. "Nathan Cole wasn't supposed to play hero. The plan was for the Taliban to capture you, hold you for a few days, then we would negotiate your release. Why? To control the narrative. To create a diplomatic incident that would justify increased military presence in that region." His expression hardened. Instead, Cole decided to martyr himself, and I was left with a wounded sergeant, asking inconvenient questions. The casual admission of his betrayal stoked Alexis's rage, but she contained it, channeling it into focus. Emotional outbursts wouldn't help her now. Information might. And Operation Archimedes, is that another controlled narrative? "It's correction," Blackwood replied, an unsettling fervor entering his voice. "The system that sacrificed your team, that's abandoned veterans, that's allowed corruption to flourish while good soldiers die, it needs to be reset. Through violence? Through precise, targeted intervention." Blackwood's gaze was distant now, seeing beyond the confines of the vehicle. 7 individuals, 7 decision-makers who represent the corruption that's rotting our country from within. Their removal creates a cascading effect, a power vacuum that allows for realignment. The clinical detachment with which he described assassination chilled Alexis more than any emotional display would have. This wasn't the ranting of a madman, but the calculated strategy of a military mind that had concluded violence was the only solution. "You're talking about a coup," she said quietly. "I'm talking about surgical excision of a cancer." Blackwood refocused on her. "You of all people should understand. You've seen what happens when those in power make decisions based on political expediency rather than what's right. And you appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner. Someone had to." His voice hardened. "After what happened to your team, to dozens of teams like yours, I tried working within the system. Filed reports, raised concerns, pursued official channels. And what happened? They promoted the architects of those failures, buried the evidence, silenced the witnesses." Despite herself, Alexis felt a flicker of understanding. She had walked a similar path after Afghanistan, trying to find justice through official means only to be stonewalled at every turn. "So you went rogue," she said. "Built a criminal empire to fund your personal vendetta." "To fund a necessary correction," Blackwood countered. "The weapons, the drugs, means to an end. Resources for an operation that will ultimately save more lives than it takes." The SUV turned again, entering what appeared to be an industrial area on the outskirts of Denver. Warehouses and manufacturing facilities lined the street, most dark at this late hour. They pulled into a gated compound, security cameras tracking their approach. "Where are we?" Alexis asked, as the vehicle stopped inside a large warehouse. "Temporary headquarters," Blackwood replied, "until Operation Archimedes is complete." As they exited the SUV, Alexis took in her surroundings with a tactician's eye. The warehouse had been converted into a command center, computer stations, communications equipment, maps, and diagrams covering the walls. A dozen men and women moved with purpose among the stations, all with the unmistakable bearing of military personnel. In the center of it all stood a large table displaying what appeared to be a 3-dimensional model of a building complex. Alexis recognized it immediately, the federal building in Denver, which housed offices for multiple government agencies, including the FBI, Homeland Security, and several military liaison units. "The National Security Conference," she realized aloud. "That's your target." Blackwood nodded, a hint of admiration in his expression. 3 days from now, the 7 individuals I mentioned will all be in one location discussing strategic partnerships for homeland defense. The same people who authorized operations like the one that killed your team, who profited from defense contracts, while soldiers died with inadequate equipment, who buried evidence of their own corruption. And civilian casualties, collateral damage. Minimal, Blackwood assured her. The operation is designed specifically to limit casualties. We're not terrorists, Sergeant. We're operators conducting a mission against legitimate targets. The familiar military phrasing sent a chill down Alexis's spine. How many times had she heard similar justifications in briefings before operations in Afghanistan or Iraq? How many times had she accepted them without question? "You're delusional," she said flatly. "Whatever you're planning, it's not an operation. It's mass murder." Blackwood regarded her with something like disappointment. "I had hoped you might understand, that your experiences might have shown you the necessity of drastic action. My experiences taught me that violence begets violence, that revenge doesn't bring peace. This isn't about revenge." Blackwood's voice rose slightly. "It's about justice. It's about preventing more soldiers like Nathan Cole from being sacrificed for political convenience." At the mention of Nathan's name, something shifted in Alexis's expression, a momentary crack in her composure that Blackwood didn't miss. "You still carry his dog tags," he observed. "After all these years. Why guilt love or something else?" Before she could respond, the warehouse door opened and Vincent Harding entered, followed by two iron wolves half carrying a struggling figure between them. Emily Reed. Alexis felt her blood turn to ice. "She has nothing to do with this. Let her go." "On the contrary," Harding said, approaching the table. "Doctor, Reed has been quite involved accessing confidential medical records gathering intelligence. My men found her at the hunting lodge along with her father. The old man is still there under guard." Emily's eyes found Alexis's fear and determination warring in her expression. A bruise was forming on her cheek, and her hands were bound before her with plastic zip ties. "I'm sorry," she said. "They came right after you left. There were too many." "It's not your fault," Alexis assured her, calculating new odds, new scenarios. With Emily as leverage, her options had narrowed considerably. Blackwood watched this exchange with clinical interest. "Attachment. Your one consistent weakness. Sergeant Morgan. In Afghanistan, it was loyalty to your team that made you predictable. Now it's these civilians you've allowed yourself to care for." He gestured to his men. "Secure them both in the conference room. Double guards. They're more resourceful than they appear." As they were led away, Alexis caught a glimpse of the warehouse's main entrance, heavily guarded, but potentially vulnerable if she could create a sufficient distraction. She filed the observation away, continuing to build her mental map of the facility, noting camera positions, guard rotations, potential weapons. The conference room proved to be a glass-walled office overlooking the main floor of the warehouse. Two armed guards took positions outside the door, while another pair patrolled the perimeter of the main floor, maintaining sight lines to the glass office. Once alone with Emily, Alexis immediately checked her for injuries beyond the visible bruise. "Are you hurt? Did they harm Edwin?" Emily shook her head. "Dad's okay. Scared but unharmed. They were more interested in finding you and Dylan." She lowered her voice. "Did he get away with the evidence?" "I think so," Alexis replied quietly, aware of the possibility of listening devices. "If he followed the plan, he's already contacted the FBI." Relief flickered across Emily's face, followed quickly by renewed concern. "These people, they're planning something terrible, aren't they?" "Yes." Alexis moved to the glass wall, surveying the activity below. "An assassination operation at the National Security Conference. Multiple high-level targets." "My God." Emily joined her at the window. "Can they be stopped?" Not easily. These aren't amateurs. They're former military, probably special forces with tactical training and discipline. Alexis's eyes tracked Blackwood as he moved among his team, checking preparations, reviewing plans. But they're not infallible. Emily studied her face. You have a plan. The beginning of one. Alexis turned, meeting Emily's gaze directly. But it's risky, and I can't guarantee your safety. I'm already in danger, Emily pointed out. We both are. What's the alternative? Wait to be killed once they've completed their operation. Alexis acknowledged this with a grim nod. Blackwood won't keep us alive after Archimedes is executed. We're witnesses, liabilities. Then we fight. Emily's voice held surprising determination. Whatever your plan is, I'll help. For a moment, Alexis simply looked at her, this civilian who had shown more courage in the past few days than many soldiers she had known. There was something in Emily's steady gaze that reminded her of Nathan. Not the tactical brilliance or the command presence, but the unwavering moral compass, the refusal to back down when principles were at stake. First, we need to create an opportunity, Alexis said, lowering her voice further. And for that, we need to understand their timeline, their vulnerabilities. As night deepened into early morning, they observed the operation below, gathering intelligence on shift changes, security protocols, and the overall structure of Blackwood's team. Alexis noted with professional appreciation the military precision with which the team operated, clear chain of command, defined responsibilities, contingency planning. But even the most disciplined operation had weaknesses. The question was whether she could identify and exploit them before Blackwood implemented his plan. Dylan Westbrook drove through the darkness, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind replaying the moment Alexis had thrust the camera into his hands and ordered him to leave. The rational part of him knew she had made the tactically correct decision. The evidence was more important than either of them individually. But the thought of leaving her behind, potentially at Blackwood's mercy, ate at him. He checked the rearview mirror for the 100th time, confirming he wasn't being followed, then reached for the satellite phone. His contact in Denver answered on the second ring. Mitchell? It's Westbrook. I have the evidence, photos, recordings. Blackwood is personally involved in weapons trafficking, and he's planning something called Operation Archimedes. Where are you now? 20 miles east of Granite Falls, heading toward Denver. But Morgan's been captured, and Blackwood has hostages, Emily Reed and her father. A brief silence then. The FBI is mobilizing based on the preliminary evidence you sent earlier. But they need more to move against someone with Blackwood's connections, especially with this national security conference approaching. I have more, Dylan assured him. Concrete proof of Blackwood's involvement, his presence at the weapons transfer. But we need to move fast. If Archimedes is what we think it is, an assassination operation targeting the conference, Mitchell finished. Yes, we've pieced that much together from your earlier intelligence, but without knowing the specific methodology or the exact targets, the Bureau is hesitant to disrupt a major security event on limited evidence. Dylan swore under his breath. People will die if they wait for perfect intelligence. I know. Mitchell's voice was grim. That's why we're meeting in person. I have someone with me, someone who can help cut through the bureaucracy. How soon can you reach Denver? Dylan calculated quickly. 90 minutes, assuming no complications. We'll be waiting at the location I'm texting you now. And Dylan, yeah, be careful. Blackwood has resources we don't fully understand yet. If he realizes you have evidence that could expose Operation Archimedes, I know, Dylan said quietly. He'll send everything he has to stop me. As if summoned by the words, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, approaching rapidly from behind. Two vehicles, moving in tandem, closing the distance with professional precision. "I may have spoken too soon about complications," Dillon told Mitchell. "I've got company." "Can you evade?" Dillon assessed his options. The forest road offered limited opportunities for evasive driving, and his truck, while sturdy, couldn't outrun pursuit vehicles in a straight chase. "Not easily, but I can delay them." His military training kicked in mind-mapping fallback positions, defensive options, extraction routes. "I'll contact you when I can." He ended the call as the first vehicle pulled alongside him, a black SUV with tinted windows. The passenger window lowered, revealing an armed man who gestured for Dillon to pull over. Instead, Dillon slammed the truck into the SUV's side, forcing it toward the edge of the road. Metal screamed against metal as the vehicles collided the truck's greater weight, giving Dillon a momentary advantage. The SUV swerved its driver, fighting to maintain control on the narrow road. Dillon used the opportunity to accelerate, putting distance between them before the second vehicle could close in. But the respite was brief. The pursuing vehicles recovered quickly, demonstrating the skill of professional drivers. They separated, one falling back, while the other accelerated, attempting to box Dillon in. He reached into the glove compartment, retrieving the pistol his contact had provided. Not his preferred option, a firefight while driving was dangerous and unpredictable, but he needed to be prepared. The road ahead curved sharply around a steep hillside, with a guardrail the only barrier between the pavement and a long drop. Dillon took the curve at dangerous speed, the truck's tires screaming in protest. The pursuing vehicles followed the lead SUV, drawing alongside once more. This time the passenger leaned out the window, weapon raised. Dillon didn't hesitate. He fired through his own window, the shot going wide, but forcing the gunman to duck back inside. Then he yanked the wheel hard, sideswiping the SUV and sending it scraping along the guardrail in a shower of sparks. For a critical moment, the SUV slowed, giving Dillon the opening he needed. He floored the accelerator, pushing the truck to its limits as he created distance between himself and his pursuers. The satellite phone rang. Dillon answered with one hand, keeping the other on the wheel as he navigated the winding road. "Change of plans," Mitchell said without preamble. "We're sending a helicopter to extract you. There's a clearing 3 miles ahead, just off the main road. Can you reach it?" "If I can lose these pursuit vehicles..." Dillon checked his mirror. The SUVs were falling behind, but still in sight. "ETA on the helicopter." 15 minutes. We'll have ground support waiting at the clearing, but you need to get there first." Dillon's mind raced, calculating options. The camera with the evidence was secure in his jacket pocket, but if he didn't reach the extraction point, it would all be for nothing. And more importantly, without federal intervention, Alexis and the others remained in Blackwood's hands. "I'll be there," he promised, then ended the call. The road ahead straightened, giving the pursuit vehicles an advantage. They began to close the gap once more, engines roaring in the night. Dillon needed to change the equation. A straight race to the clearing would end with him being overtaken. He needed to eliminate at least one of the pursuers. As the road curved again, he saw his opportunity, a narrow side trail barely visible in the darkness, branching off to the right. At the last possible moment, he wrenched the wheel, sending the truck bouncing onto the rough trail. The sudden maneuver caught his pursuers by surprise. The lead SUV shot past the turnoff, while the second tried to follow Dillon's path, only to become stuck in the soft shoulder at the trail's entrance. Now he faced a different challenge. The trail was rough, never intended for a vehicle of the truck's size. Branches scratched at the windows, and unseen dips threatened to bottom out the suspension. But it was heading in roughly the right direction, and for the moment he had lost his pursuers. Dillon pushed on, guided more by instinct than visibility, until the trail widened into what appeared to be an old logging road. More navigable, but also more likely to be known to his pursuers if they regrouped. The clearing Mitchell had mentioned couldn't be far now. Dylan checked the satellite phone's GPS, confirming his position. Less than a mile to the extraction point. He had just registered this when a new sound reached him, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors. But they were coming from behind him, not from the direction of the clearing. Blackwood had air assets. Dylan accelerated, pushing the truck to its limits on the uneven surface. The helicopter was gaining on him, its searchlight sweeping the forest below, seeking his vehicle among the trees. The clearing appeared ahead, a roughly circular area, where the forest had been cut back from the road. And there, on the far side, the welcome sight of a helicopter touching down its side door, open figures moving toward the tree line with weapons ready. But behind him, the pursuing helicopter had spotted his truck. Its searchlight locked onto the vehicle, and the distinctive sound of a mounted weapon being prepared to fire reached Dylan's ears. He had seconds, not minutes, to reach the extraction team. Dylan abandoned the truck 50 yards from the clearing, grabbing the camera and sprinting for the tree line. Behind him, gunfire erupted from the pursuing helicopter rounds, impacting the ground around him as he zigzagged toward safety. The extraction team returned fire, forcing the helicopter to veer away momentarily. Dylan used the opportunity to cover the remaining distance, reaching the protective cover of the trees, where Mitchell and 3 armed men waited. "The camera!" Dylan gasped, pressing it into Mitchell's hands. "Everything we need. Evidence of Blackwood. The weapons, all of it." Mitchell nodded, passing the camera to one of his men. "Let's go. Our window is closing." As they ran for the waiting helicopter, Dylan explained what had happened. Alexis's capture, the hostages at the hunting lodge, what they had learned about Operation Archimedes. "The FBI is preparing a response team," Mitchell assured him as they boarded the helicopter. "But they need to know where Blackwood is holding Morgan and the Reed woman. Any ideas?" Dylan shook his head. "They could be anywhere. Blackwood has resources throughout the region." "Then we focus on what we do know," Mitchell decided as the helicopter lifted off. "The National Security Conference. If that's Archimedes' target, we start there and work backward." As they rose above the trees, Dylan caught a glimpse of the pursuing helicopter circling the abandoned truck, its searchlight illuminating the empty vehicle. They had escaped, but the race was far from over. And somewhere, Alexis was facing Blackwood alone. Morning light filtered through the glass walls of the conference room, illuminating the activity on the warehouse floor below. Alexis, who had not slept, continued her methodical observation of Blackwood's operation. Beside her, Emily dozed fitfully in a chair, exhaustion finally overcoming her determination to remain alert. The night had provided valuable intelligence. Alexis now understood the basic structure of Blackwood's team, approximately 30 operatives divided into 4 units with specific responsibilities. The timing of shift changes, the location of weapons and equipment, the chain of command with Blackwood at the top and Harding as his second. Most importantly, she had identified several potential vulnerabilities. The communications system was centralized, with a main server handling coordination between teams. The armory was secured, but accessible from the main floor, and there were clearly tensions between some of the former military personnel and the Iron Wolves members, suggesting less than perfect unit cohesion. All valuable information, but useless without an opportunity to exploit it. That opportunity arrived mid-morning, when the door to the conference room opened, and Vincent Harding entered, followed by 2 guards. "The colonel wants to see you," he told Alexis. "Just you," he added, when Emily started to rise. Alexis met Emily's concerned gaze. "It's all right. Stay here, rest." As she followed Harding out, Alexis whispered, "Watch for my signal," leaving Emily with the cryptic instruction as the door closed behind them. Harding led her through the warehouse to a separate office area where Blackwood sat before multiple computer screens displaying what appeared to be security camera feeds from various locations. "Thank you, Vincent," Blackwood said without looking up. "That will be all." After Harding departed, Blackwood finally turned to Alexis. "Your friend Westbrook has proven more resourceful than expected. He reached federal authorities with some of the evidence you gathered." Alexis kept her expression neutral, though internally she felt a surge of hope. If Dylan had delivered the evidence, there was still a chance to stop Operation Archimedes. "Unfortunately for him," Blackwood continued, "the bureaucracy moves slowly. By the time the FBI acts on his information, Archimedes will be complete." "Then why tell me this?" Alexis asked. "Why not just kill me now and focus on your operation?" Blackwood studied her for a moment. "Because despite everything, I still respect your capabilities, your loyalty. In another life, you might have understood what I'm trying to accomplish. In another life, you might not have betrayed everything you once stood for," she countered. He accepted this with a slight nod. "Perhaps, but we play the hand we're dealt." Blackwood gestured to one of the screens which showed a security feed of what appeared to be a holding cell. Inside, a man sat on a narrow cot, his face turned away from the camera. "I thought you might want to see this before we proceed." Alexis stepped closer, studying the figure on the screen. There was something familiar about the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself despite his captivity. "Who is that?" Instead of answering, Blackwood pressed a button and the camera angle changed, revealing the man's face. Alexis felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Nathan Cole. Older, thinner, with a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, but unmistakably Nathan. The man she had watched sacrifice himself in Afghanistan. The man whose dog tags she had carried for 5 years. The man she had mourned, whose death had defined the course of her life. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He died. I saw the explosion. The burning Humvee." "Captain Cole survived, though not without significant injuries," Blackwood said, his voice dispassionate, as if discussing a routine operational detail. "He was recovered by a Taliban unit that had been paid to capture, not kill. When I realized he was still alive, I arranged for his transfer to a private medical facility." "You've kept him prisoner for 5 years!" Horror and rage warred within Alexis, threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained control. "I've kept him secure," Blackwood corrected. "Nathan knew too much about my early operations, about the connections I was building. He had been investigating me for months before Korengal." The revelation hit Alexis with physical force. Nathan had known. He had suspected Blackwood's corruption and had been gathering evidence just as she and Dylan were doing now. "Why show me this?" she demanded, her voice raw with emotion. "What possible reason?" "Because you have a choice to make," Blackwood interrupted. "The federal response to Westbrook's evidence will be delayed, but not indefinitely. Eventually, they'll move against me. When that happens, contingency protocols will be executed." He nodded toward the screen showing Nathan, "including the elimination of certain liabilities." The implication was clear: help Blackwood or Nathan dies. "What do you want from me?" Alexis asked, though she already knew the answer. "Your skills, your cooperation. In return, I guarantee Captain Cole's safety." Blackwood leaned forward. "After Archimedes is complete, both of you will be free to go. You have my word. The word of a man who betrayed his country, who sacrificed his own soldiers." Alexis shook her head. "That's worth nothing." "Then consider this." Blackwood pressed another button, and a new feed appeared on the screen. Emily in the conference room, watched by armed guards. "Dr. Reed, her father, Westbrook, if my men find him. All of them will die if Archimedes is compromised. Is that a price you're willing to pay for your principles? It was the ultimate manipulation, leveraging her loyalty, her sense of responsibility against her moral compass. The tactician in Alexis recognized the elegant cruelty of the choice. The human in her recoiled from it. "I need to see him," she said finally. "Nathan, in person, not through a camera feed that could be manipulated." Blackwood considered this, then nodded. "Fair enough. I'll arrange it. But understand this, Sergeant Morgan, if you attempt to escape, if you try to warn anyone about Archimedes, everyone you care about dies, starting with Captain Cole." As she was led back to the conference room, Alexis's mind raced, calculating new variables, new possibilities. Nathan was alive. The knowledge altered everything and nothing. The mission remained the same: stop Operation Archimedes, prevent the assassinations, bring Blackwood to justice. But the stakes had risen exponentially. Emily looked up as Alexis entered, immediately noting her altered demeanor. "What happened? What did he tell you?" Alexis waited until the guards had left, then leaned close, keeping her voice to a whisper. "Nathan Cole is alive. Blackwood's been holding him captive for 5 years." Emily's eyes widened. "My God, are you sure it's really him? It could be a trick." "I'll know when I see him. Blackwood's arranging it." Alexis glanced toward the glass wall, confirming their conversation couldn't be overheard. "Listen carefully. This changes the timeline, but not the plan. When I create a diversion, you need to reach the communications hub on the east side of the warehouse floor. If you can disable it even briefly, it will disrupt coordination between Blackwood's teams. And what will you be doing? Finding Nathan and stopping Blackwood." Alexis met Emily's gaze directly. "It's going to be dangerous, chaotic. If you see an opportunity to escape, take it. Don't wait for me." Emily shook her head. "I'm not leaving you behind." Before Alexis could respond, the door opened again. Vincent Harding stood there, flanked by the ever-present guards. "It's time," he said. "The colonel's arranged your meeting with Cole." As Alexis followed Harding through the warehouse, she noted that the activity had increased: operatives checking weapons, reviewing maps, preparing equipment. Operation Archimedes was moving into its final phase. They descended a staircase to a lower level, a basement area that appeared to have once been used for storage. Now it had been converted into a secure holding area with several cells along a dimly lit corridor. Harding stopped before one of the doors. 5 minutes, he said, unlocking it. "No physical contact. The guards stay." Alexis nodded, steeling herself for whatever she might find inside. The door swung open, revealing a small, Spartanly furnished cell. And there, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, was Nathan Cole. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening in recognition. "Alexis?" His voice was hoarse, as if from disuse. "Is that really you?" "It's me, Nate." She fought to keep her voice steady, to maintain control, despite the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I thought you were dead. All this time." Nathan stood, moving carefully, favoring his right leg. The scar on his face was even more pronounced in person, a jagged line that spoke of hasty battlefield medicine rather than proper surgical care. But his eyes, the same steady, intelligent eyes she remembered, fixed on her with piercing intensity. "They told me everyone died," he said. "The entire team. That I was the only survivor. They lied to both of us." Alexis glanced at the guards, then back to Nathan. "Martinez survived the initial ambush, but died during evacuation. The others, they didn't make it." Nathan nodded, absorbing this. "And you, how did you escape Blackwood?" "I didn't know it was him, not at first. I just knew something was wrong about the delayed extraction, about the intelligence that led us into that valley. She kept her voice low, aware of the listening guards. I started asking questions. They offered me a discharge silence in exchange for freedom. But you kept looking. It wasn't a question. Yes, until I found evidence connecting Blackwood to arms trafficking to the ambush. Then I had to disappear before they could silence me permanently. Nathan's expression hardened. Archimedes, that's what this is all about. He's been planning it for years, building resources, establishing networks. I know about the National Security Conference, Alexis confirmed. The assassinations he's planning. It's worse than that. Nathan glanced at the guards, then stepped closer to Alexis, lowering his voice further. The assassinations are just Phase 1. Phase 2 is a coordinated attack on multiple federal facilities across the country. He's created cells in 6 major cities, waiting for the signal. The scale of the operation staggered Alexis. This wasn't just a rogue colonel's vendetta. It was a coordinated attempt to destabilize the entire federal government. "Why tell me this?" she asked, matching his quiet tone. "You know I'll try to stop him." A ghost of a smile touched Nathan's lips. "Because you can. Because you're the best operator I ever trained." He held her gaze. "And because some missions are worth dying for." The words echoed their last exchange in Afghanistan when he had ordered her to leave him behind. The same determination shone in his eyes now, the willingness to sacrifice himself for something greater. "Time's up," Harding announced from the doorway. Alexis turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Nathan. "I'm coming back for you," she promised. "Hold on." As she was escorted back through the warehouse, Alexis's mind was already formulating a new plan. The stakes had risen exponentially, but so had her resolve. Blackwood had to be stopped, not just for Nathan or Emily or the targets at the conference, but for the country he claimed to be saving through violence. In the conference room, Emily waited anxiously. "Was it really him?" she asked, as soon as the guards left them alone. "Yes." Alexis moved to the window, surveying the warehouse floor with new purpose. "And it's worse than we thought. The conference assassinations are just the beginning. Blackwood has cells in multiple cities waiting to launch coordinated attacks." "My gee," Emily joined her at the window. "Can the two of us really stop something this big? Not alone." Alexis's gaze fixed on a figure entering the warehouse, Dylan Westbrook, flanked by armed guards. "But we're not alone anymore." Dylan's appearance was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. If Blackwood's men had captured him after he delivered the evidence to the FBI, bringing him here made tactical sense, consolidating all threats in one secure location. As Dylan was led toward what appeared to be Blackwood's office, his gaze swept the warehouse, eventually finding Alexis through the glass walls of the conference room. No recognition showed on his face, but Alexis knew he had seen them. "This changes things," she told Emily. "With Dylan here, we have a better chance. But we need to move fast, before Blackwood decides we're more valuable as leverage than as potential allies." "What's the plan?" Emily asked, determination replacing fear in her expression. "When they bring Dylan here, which they will, we create a distraction. Something significant enough to draw attention from the guards. That's when you make for the communications hub, and I go for the armory. And then we improvise." Alexis's expression hardened. "And we stop Archimedes, whatever it takes." The next hour passed in tense anticipation. Alexis continued her careful observation of the warehouse operations, noting that the activity had increased further. Teams were conducting final equipment checks, vehicles were being prepared, and Blackwood himself moved among the groups, issuing last-minute instructions. When the door finally opened, it was Blackwood himself who entered, followed by Dillon and the ever-present guards. "Family reunion," Blackwood remarked dryly. "Nathan Cole's brother, his loyal sergeant. All we're missing is the captain himself." Dillon's eyes met Alexis's, a silent communication passing between them. He looked roughed up, but not seriously injured. A cut above his eyebrow, bruising on his jawline, the way he favored his left side suggesting bruised ribs. "I thought you'd want to hear the news together," Blackwood continued. "The FBI is mobilizing based on the evidence Mr. Westbrook provided. Unfortunately for them, Operation Archimedes has been accelerated. By the time they secure the National Security Conference, the primary targets will already be eliminated and Phase 2 will be underway." "Well, you won't succeed," Dillon said, his voice steady despite his injuries. "The evidence I delivered includes details of your operation, your methods, the identities of your key personnel. Evidence that will be valuable for the historical record, I'm sure." Blackwood seemed unconcerned. "But it won't stop what's already in motion." "Maybe not," Alexis interjected. "But we might." The statement hung in the air, a clear challenge. Blackwood studied her, then Dillon, then Emily, assessing the threat they represented. "I admire your confidence, Sergeant Morgan, but the three of you unarmed and outnumbered against my entire operation." He shook his head. "Those aren't odds even you would take." "I've faced worse," Alexis replied, holding his gaze. "In Afghanistan, with Nathan." The mention of Nathan's name in this context was deliberate, a reminder to Blackwood of his vulnerability. He had kept Nathan alive for 5 years, a tactical error born of sentiment or necessity, but of vulnerability nonetheless. Blackwood recognized the implicit threat. His expression hardened. "Guard them closely," he instructed the men at the door. "I want all three present when we execute Archimedes. Let them witness what they failed to prevent." After he left, the three of them were alone except for the guards stationed outside the glass walls. "Nathan's alive," Alexis told Dillon without preamble. "Blackwood's been holding him prisoner for 5 years." Dillon's shock was evident, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face: disbelief, hope, anger. "You're sure you've seen him?" "I've seen him, spoken to him. It's really Nathan." Alexis kept her voice low, aware of potential listening devices. "And he confirmed what we suspected about Archimedes. It's not just the conference. Blackwood has sleeper cells in multiple cities ready to launch coordinated attacks." "Jesus." Dillon ran a hand through his hair, processing this. "The FBI is focusing all their resources on securing the conference. They don't know about the secondary attacks. Which is why we need to stop Blackwood here now, before the operation can be initiated." Alexis glanced at the guards, then back to Dillon. "What happened after we separated at the observation point?" Dillon quickly recounted his escape, the pursuit, the extraction by Mitchell's team, and his eventual capture when they attempted to infiltrate what they believed was Blackwood's secondary command post. "Mitchell escaped," he concluded. "He has the evidence, and he's working with the FBI to coordinate a response. But they're still hours away from having sufficient manpower to breach this facility." We don't have hours," Alexis said grimly. "Based on the activity level, Archimedes launches within the next 60 minutes. Emily, who had been quietly observing their exchange, spoke up. "Then we create our own opportunity. Now, before they separate us again." Alexis and Dillon both looked at her, surprised by the determination in her voice. "She's right," Alexis decided. "We're in the best position we'll get all together with Blackwood, focused on final preparations, rather than us." Dillon nodded his agreement. "What's the play?" Alexis outlined her plan quickly, a coordinated action that would create maximum disruption with their limited resources. It was high risk, with multiple potential failure points, but as she had told Blackwood, she had faced worse odds. "On my signal, she concluded, meeting their eyes in turn. Ready. They nodded, positioning themselves according to the plan. Alexis moved to the door, examining the electronic lock that secured it from the outside. Emily stood nearby, prepared to follow Alexis's lead, while Dylan positioned himself by the glass wall, watching the guards' rotation patterns. "Now," Alexis said quietly, and began pounding on the door, calling for help. Her voice pitched to convey urgency without alarm. One of the guards approached, annoyed rather than suspicious. "What? She's having a seizure," Alexis said, gesturing frantically toward Emily, who had collapsed to the floor in a convincing simulation of a medical emergency. "She needs help." The guard hesitated, then called for his partner. Together, they unlocked the door and entered the room, moving toward Emily's convulsing form. It was the opening Alexis needed. She struck with practiced precision, targeting the first guard's carotid artery with enough pressure to render him unconscious within seconds. Dylan moved simultaneously, tackling the second guard before he could radio for help. The entire takedown occurred in near silence, both guards neutralized before they could alert the wider security team. "Zip ties," Alexis ordered, and Emily produced the plastic restraints she had palmed from one of the guards during an earlier check. They secured the unconscious men, gagged them with strips torn from their own shirts, and relieved them of their weapons and communication devices. "Phase 1 complete," Alexis said, checking the guards' weapons, standard 9mm pistols fully loaded. "Now for the hard part." They exited the conference room cautiously, using the guards' access cards to lock the door behind them. From their elevated position, they could see most of the warehouse floor, the teams making final preparations, the vehicles being loaded, Blackwood himself at the central command table, reviewing plans. "Emily Communications Hub," Alexis directed, handing her one of the guards' radios. "When you hear the diversion, disable as much as you can, then make for the east exit. Dylan with me. We're going for Nathan." Emily squeezed Alexis's hand briefly. "Be careful," she said, then slipped away, moving along the catwalk that circled the upper level of the warehouse. "Nathan's in a holding area below the main floor," Alexis told Dylan as they moved in the opposite direction, staying low to avoid being spotted from below. "Basement level east corridor." "And the diversion?" Dylan asked, checking the pistol he had taken from the second guard. Alexis pointed to a stack of fuel drums near the vehicles being prepared for Archimedes. "Those should do nicely." They reached a stairwell at the far end of the catwalk, descending quickly but cautiously. At the bottom, Alexis paused, listening for approaching personnel. Satisfied they were clear for the moment, she led Dylan through a series of narrow corridors toward where she had last seen Nathan. The holding area was guarded as expected, 2 men stationed at the entrance to the corridor containing the cells. Alexis signaled for Dylan to wait, then moved forward alone, adopting the confident stride of someone with authority. "Blackwood sent me to move the prisoner," she told the guards as she approached. "The captain is being transferred before the operation launches." The guards exchanged glances, clearly suspicious. "We don't have orders for that," one said, his hand drifting toward his weapon. "Check with command if you want," Alexis replied, her posture relaxed but alert. "But Blackwood's busy with final preparations. He won't appreciate the interruption." The invocation of Blackwood's name created just enough hesitation for Alexis to make her move. She closed the distance between them in 2 rapid strides, striking the first guard with a precision blow to the throat that collapsed his windpipe. As he fell gasping, she seized his weapon and turned it on the second guard. "Keys," she demanded. "Now." The guard complied, his movements slow and careful as he unclipped the key ring from his belt. Dylan emerged from his position, covering the guard, while Alexis secured the keys. "Which cell?" she asked, pressing the barrel of her pistol against the guard's temple. "End of the hall." He managed his voice tight with fear. Last door on the right. They secured both guards, then moved quickly down the corridor. The cell was exactly where indicated its heavy door secured with both electronic and conventional locks. "Nate," Dylan called softly, as Alexis worked on the locks. "Can you hear me?" A shuffling sound came from within, then Nathan's voice disbelieving. "Dylan, is that you? It's me, brother. We're getting you out of here." The door swung open, revealing Nathan standing in the center of the small cell, his expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. For a moment, the brothers simply stared at each other, 5 years of separation and grief hanging between them. Then Dylan stepped forward, embracing Nathan fiercely. "I thought you were dead," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "All this time." "I'm sorry," Nathan replied, returning the embrace with equal intensity. "I wanted to contact you to let you know, but there was no way. Blackwood kept me isolated, moved frequently." Alexis, standing guard at the door, gave them this brief moment before reality reasserted itself. "We need to move," she said. "The diversion won't wait." Nathan nodded immediately, shifting into operational mode despite his years of captivity. "Blackwood's launching Archimedes today. The primary team is already en route to the conference." "We know," Alexis confirmed, "and about the secondary attacks planned for after the conference." "Then you understand what's at stake." Nathan's expression hardened with resolve. "We need to reach the command center. If we can disable the communications system, the secondary teams won't receive the activation signal." "Emily's already working on that," Alexis told him. "But we need a diversion to cover her work and our escape." They moved back through the corridor, Nathan limping but determined, Dylan supporting him when necessary. At the stairwell, Alexis paused, surveying the warehouse floor through a small window in the door. The activity had increased further, with teams clearly preparing for imminent departure. "The fuel drums," she reminded Dylan. "One well-placed shot should create enough chaos for us to reach the exit." "And Nathan, he can barely walk, let alone run." "I'll manage," Nathan assured him. "I've been planning this escape for 5 years. Don't hold back on my account." Alexis made the final calculations: distance to the fuel drum's angle of fire, likelihood of hitting the target under pressure. The odds weren't ideal, but they rarely were in field operations. "On 3, she said. 1, 2. Before she could say 3, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights began flashing, and personnel on the warehouse floor moved with sudden urgency, weapons drawn. "Emily," Alexis realized. She must have triggered something at the communications hub. Through the window, they could see Blackwood issuing rapid commands, directing teams toward various defensive positions. The element of surprise was gone, but so was the need for a subtle approach. "New plan," Alexis decided. "We fight our way to the communications hub, secure Emily, then get to the exit, all of us together." Nathan and Dylan nodded their agreement, and Alexis pushed open the door, leading them into the chaos of the warehouse floor. The next minutes passed in a blur of tactical movement and controlled violence. Alexis led, clearing their path with precise fire and hand-to-hand combat when necessary. Dylan protected Nathan, who, despite his physical limitations, contributed with tactical guidance and occasional well-placed shots from a weapon taken from a fallen guard. They fought their way across the warehouse floor, taking advantage of the confusion caused by the alarm and Emily's sabotage of the communication system. Blackwood's personnel, while professionally trained, hadn't anticipated an internal threat of this magnitude. At the communications hub, they found Emily barricaded behind an overturned desk, exchanging fire with 2 Iron Wolves members. "Cover me," Alexis told the brothers, then sprinted toward Emily's position, firing as she moved to draw attention away from the young doctor. The distraction worked. The Iron Wolves focused on Alexis, giving Dylan clear shots at both. They fell in quick succession, and Alexis reached Emily's position unharmed. "The system's down," Emily reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I managed to disable the primary servers before they realized what I was doing." "Good work," Alexis said, genuinely impressed by Emily's composure under fire. "Let's move. East exit as planned." They rejoined Nathan and Dylan, forming a tight unit as they moved toward the exit. The warehouse had descended into chaos, with multiple alarms blaring, and Blackwood's forces divided between defending the facility and preparing for Archimedes. They had almost reached the exit when a familiar voice cut through the din. "That's far enough, Sergeant Morgan." Raymond Blackwood stood 20 feet away, a pistol trained on their group. Unlike his personnel, who moved with increasing desperation, Blackwood remained calm, controlled his aim steady. "It's over, Colonel," Alexis replied, her own weapon raised. "The FBI knows about Archimedes. Your communications are down. The secondary teams won't receive their activation signals." "A setback, not a defeat," Blackwood countered. "The primary team is already in position at the conference. The targets will be eliminated as planned." "And then what?" Nathan challenged, stepping forward despite Dylan's attempt to hold him back. "More violence, more death. When does it end, Raymond?" "When the system that betrayed us is reformed," Blackwood replied, his gaze shifting to Nathan. "You of all people should understand that, Captain. You were investigating the same corruption before Korengal." "I was investigating individuals who had broken their oaths," Nathan corrected. "Not plotting to tear down the entire government." "A distinction without a difference." Blackwood's attention returned to Alexis. "Lower your weapons, all of you, or I start shooting, beginning with Dr. Reed." It was a standoff, with neither side holding a clear advantage. Blackwood was one man, but his position gave him a clear line of fire to all of them. And behind him, more of his personnel were regrouping, preparing to support their leader. "There's another way," Alexis said, lowering her weapon slightly. "Surrender now. Cooperate with the authorities. Your information on corruption within the military and intelligence communities would be valuable. It could lead to real reform through legal channels." For a moment, something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. A brief hesitation, a glimpse of the officer he had once been. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold determination that had driven him to create Operation Archimedes. "Too late for that, Sergeant. Far too late." He raised his weapon, aiming at Emily, his intention clear. Alexis moved without conscious thought, years of training and instinct taking over. She lunged forward, putting herself between Emily and Blackwood's aim as she fired her own weapon. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Alexis felt the impact of Blackwood's bullet, a burning sensation in her left shoulder. But her own shot had found its mark center mass, a killing shot that dropped Blackwood where he stood. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Blackwood lay motionless, the architect of Operation Archimedes, felled not by the system he sought to destroy, but by the sergeant he had tried to silence years ago. Then reality crashed back, the pain in Alexis's shoulder, the shouts of Blackwood's personnel as they registered their leader's fall, the urgent need to escape before they were overwhelmed. "Move!" Nathan ordered, his command voice cutting through the chaos. "Now!" Dylan supported Alexis, who was losing blood but still conscious and mobile. Emily ran ahead, securing the exit door. Nathan covered their retreat, using a fallen guard's automatic weapon to lay down suppressive fire. They burst through the exit into blinding daylight, and the welcome sound of approaching sirens. FBI vehicles were already entering the compound, agents deploying in tactical formation. "Federal agents," a voice called over a loudspeaker. Lower your weapons and surrender." As Blackwood's forces faced the overwhelming federal response, Alexis and the others made their way to a secure position behind the FBI's defensive line. Medical personnel immediately attended to Alexis's wound, while agents debriefed Nathan, Dylan, and Emily about the situation inside. "The primary team," Alexis reminded them through gritted teeth as her shoulder was treated. "They're already at the conference." "We know," an agent assured her. "The conference has been evacuated, and the FBI's hostage rescue team is in position. We've identified the Archimedes operatives based on the intelligence you provided." The immediate crisis contained. Alexis finally allowed herself to acknowledge the pain, both physical and emotional. 5 years of running, of hiding, of carrying the weight of Nathan's supposed death, and her own survival, all of it culminating in this moment of reckoning. Emily appeared at her side, her medical training evident as she examined the field dressing on Alexis's shoulder. "You'll need surgery," she said, "but it looks clean through and through, no major arteries hit." "Lucky?" Alexis murmured. "Not luck," Emily corrected. "You moved precisely enough to ensure the bullet missed anything vital. Even when stepping in front of a gun, you maintain control." The observation brought an unexpected smile to Alexis's lips. "Force of habit." Nathan and Dylan joined them both, showing the strain of the day's events, but standing taller now that they were reunited. "The FBI reports all Archimedes' primary targets are secure," Nathan informed them. "And with Blackwood's communication system down, the secondary teams never received their activation signal." "It's over," Dylan added. "Really over." Alexis nodded, feeling the weight of the past 5 years finally beginning to lift. Operation Archimedes had been stopped. Blackwood could no longer threaten anyone. And most importantly, Nathan was alive, a miracle she was still struggling to fully comprehend. "What happens now?" Emily asked, voicing the question that hung in the air between them. Alexis looked at the 3 people who had fought beside her, Dylan, driven by love for his brother and a thirst for justice. Nathan resilient, despite years of captivity. Emily courageous beyond her civilian status. Each of them had risked everything to stop Blackwood's plan. And each of them represented a possible future, one not defined by running, by hiding, by the ghosts of Afghanistan. "Now," Alexis said, reaching into her pocket to touch Nathan's dog tags one last time before holding them out to him, "we start over." As Nathan accepted the tags, his fingers briefly touching hers, Alexis felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of peace. Not the false peace of hiding in Granite Falls, but the genuine peace that comes from confronting one's demons and finding a way forward. The ghost had returned not to haunt her, but to release her. 1 year later, Alexis Morgan stood behind the bar at Whiskey River serving drinks with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized her first 4 years in Granite Falls. But now, something was different. The wariness in her eyes had softened. The hypervigilance that had kept her constantly scanning for threats had eased. She smiled, more often, laughed occasionally. Edwin Reed watched from his usual seat at the end of the bar, satisfaction evident in his lined face. His bar had recovered from the Iron Wolves' vandalism and business was better than ever. Tourists now came specifically to Whiskey River, drawn by rumors that the bartender had once been some kind of government operative who had stopped a major terrorist plot. Alexis neither confirmed nor denied these rumors, maintaining her privacy while no longer hiding behind it. The door opened, admitting a gust of autumn air, and Emily Reed, now in her final year of medical residency. She had returned to Granite Falls for the weekend, as she did at least once a month. "Busy night," she observed, taking a seat at the bar. "Tourism season," Alexis replied, sliding Emily's usual drink bourbon on the rocks across to her. "How's Denver?" "Challenging. Rewarding." Emily sipped her drink. The Veterans PTSD program is growing. We're getting referrals from all over the state now. Alexis nodded, pride evident in her expression. After the events with Blackwood, Emily had shifted her medical focus to trauma psychology, specializing in veterans suffering from combat-related PTSD. Her experiences had given her unique insights that made her particularly effective in this field. "And Nathan Dillon?" Alexis asked, though she already knew the answer. She maintained regular contact with both Cole brothers. "Nathan's physical therapy is progressing well. The doctors say he might be able to discard the cane entirely by next year." Emily smiled. "And Dillon's security consulting business is thriving. Turns out, having a connection to the Archimedes incident, as they're calling it, is good for business." The official story of what had happened with Blackwood and Operation Archimedes remained classified, with only vague reports reaching the public. But within certain circles, the names Cole, Morgan, and Reed were spoken with respect. "They're coming for the festival next weekend," Emily added. "Nathan mentioned wanting to try fishing at the lake." Alexis smiled at the thought. Morrison Lake, where she had once sat alone with her guilt and grief, had become a place of healing. She still visited at dawn sometimes, but now she often brought company Emily, or the Cole brothers, or even Edwin when his arthritis wasn't troubling him. "I'll be there," she promised. As the evening progressed and the bar filled with locals and tourists, Alexis moved with practiced ease among them. She was still the same person in many ways, observant, capable, private. But she had found a balance between the soldier she had been and the civilian she was becoming. Later, after closing, Alexis stood on the porch of her small cabin near the edge of town. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. In the distance, the mountains stood sentinel, their peaks silvered by moonlight. From her pocket, she withdrew a small object, not Nathan's dog tags, which had been returned to their rightful owner, but a simple coin. One side bore the Chimera unit insignia, the other the names of those lost in Korengal: Torres, Jackson, Martinez. Alexis ran her thumb over the names, honoring their memory without being consumed by it. Then she returned the coin to her pocket and went inside, closing the door on the night and the past. The ghost had returned, and in doing so had finally found rest.